Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Nedzu and Aizawa discovered the Quirkless Nightwalker? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand to those a-holes. Just by glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail and ran. This second chance at life is so not worth it. What a drag. A/N, if you came here from my Tumblr, you know this is a crossover story. You can check it if you want the spoiler. I mean, it's easy to guess from the summary alone. Here's the link, Noverp 13. Tumblr post /189014088124/Aizawa thought, discovering their nameless. Izuku's current age, 4 to 10 years old. Baited by unfaithful_fangirl and Sapphire Phoenix. Thank you so much. Midoriya Izuku is a weird kid, people said. And Bakugo Katsuki agreed with that notion wholeheartedly. It was clear from the very beginning. For a 5-year-old, he was too silent. Gaze too sharp. Speech too eloquent. He moved like a seasoned martial artist or a warrior, one or the other. He didn't indulge in playing heroes and villains like most children usually did, preferring to sleep under the trees during recess or to watch the clouds drift by. While the rest played with blocks or drew silly pictures, Izuku sat in a corner and read a book with difficult words. As the teacher showed his classmates how to multiply single digits, Izuku solved arithmetic questions even a college student would have difficulty with. As opposed to playing guess what and describing people or objects, Izuku analyzed both hero and civilian quirks to their core, how to strengthen their abilities or make up for any weaknesses. Katsuki couldn't blame anyone for thinking that Izuku had some sort of intelligence quirk. With his mature nature and how easily he absorbed any knowledge like a sponge, it seemed like the obvious conclusion. But then Izuku was diagnosed as quirkless, and any interest the boy had received began to wither and fade into blunt dismissal. It was almost like everyone forgot about his intelligence. Forgot that he could outwit any adult with ease or pick apart a pro-hero at a glance. Because in this society, quirkless seemed to equal useless. In the early days, Katsuki believed in this consensus too, ready to join the other boys in some fun with the harmless weirdo. But then he saw how easily Izuku put them down. From casually laying in the soft, green grass, to standing upright with his fists raised. One second he was still, and the next, fatty with red wings, Katsuki didn't care to remember the other boy's name, was sobbing on the ground, blood pouring from his broken nose. Izuku had dodged that one pitiful attack and smoothly kicked Fatty's legs out from under him, causing his would-be bully to crash face-first into the unforgiving ground. Katsuki didn't want to admit that he gasped in awe at the green-haired boy's action, but gasped in awe he did. Clearly, when the adults said that quirkless people were fragile and needed to be protected, they had no idea what they were talking about. Katsuki may not have bullied Izuku like the other kids, but he did ask, demanded, that Izuku teach him how to fight. After all, a hero had to beat up the villains. And Katsuki wanted to be a hero, the best hero, even if the Greenette himself didn't want to. Too troublesome, he said. It's not worth my time, he said. Besides, a hero's main duty is not fighting villains, but saving others, Izuku added, after he curb-stomped Katsuki into the ground for the millionth time. Izuku didn't even need any fancy equipment to neutralize his quirk. Just a water hose and bam. No sweat to use for his explosions. A failure like me, I can't handle the responsibility anymore. Katsuki didn't understand. The nerd had a bright future. Izuku already helped his father with work, not creating support items with his own hands, but just bouncing ideas off each other via telephone. Island was aware of his existence, already reaching out with a job offer after he graduated junior high. Not just in the support department like his father was, his analysis skills were in high demand by other technicians to improve their gadgets. No, Izuku would be a quirk research specialist with a huge salary. Obviously, he had everything in the bag. So, why would Izuku say that? Why did he think he was a failure? When he was so many leagues ahead of Katsuki, that the blonde was actually afraid he would never catch up to Izuku's shadow. In one world, Izuku wished to be a hero more than anything and received an overpowered quirk from his idol, All Might. Katsuki would spend years chasing after Deku, until the ex-bully then turned into a fierce rival. Brash and foul-mouthed, he would not hesitate to throw a punch at or step over any extras to achieve his dreams. In this world, Katsuki was still full of attitude and ready to say what he meant. But he also realized at a young age that, just because someone's quirk was not as strong or as flashy as his, it didn't mean they were weak. Not when a quirkless, supposedly useless, kid like Izuku always managed to win in their one-sided matches, and he was not talking about him using his quirk for leverage. Not when Izuku, as expressionless as he was actually depressed beyond measure. In another world, Bakugo Katsuki becomes an obstacle for Izuku to pass. In this world, Bakugo Katsuki becomes a steady pillar for his friend to lean on. Not that he'd ever admitted it, damn it. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: typo is my most loyal fan, spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. Izuku's current age, 7 to 12 years old. Baited by Sapphire Phoenix. Thank you so much. Midoriya Inko sometimes thought that her son was the reincarnation of Atlas, an old soul holding the entire weight of the world upon his shoulders. It was well established within their neighborhood that Izuku was a peculiar child. From how he spoke to how he moved. No child under 5 should be that mature. Or understand an adult when they talked of adult things. For a couple of months, Izuku did try not to attract attention. He tried to blend in by smiling a bit wider and appearing cheerfully hyperactive. But these efforts tired him out and eventually fell flat, leaving those around to feel awkward and off-center. His presence just screamed, "Look at me! Look at how different I am." Even after the diagnosis of his quirklessness spread around, that aura of uncanniness remained. Worse, it grew bigger and more focused, causing those in his vicinity to never look away, as if watching a dangerous predator from the corner of their eyes. In children, however, this unfamiliar air of menace resulted in mocking sneers and attempts to bully Izuku. Fortunately, or unfortunately for those people, Izuku stomped that intent down both figuratively and literally, with martial arts moves that her baby could not possibly have learned. She almost believed that he was born with the knowledge among everything else that he seemed to know, and that Izuku was just waiting for his body to adapt to said knowledge, and Inko considered it a relief. Katsuki was there as his friend/self-appointed bodyguard, too, protecting her child from the world, even if he didn't need it. And no, Izuku really did not need protecting. He was strong for a child his age. He carried various pieces of equipment to guard himself and others if need be, hidden in every inch of his clothing like a secret arsenal, instead of stashing it inside of his school backpack. Ranging from a stun gun and pepper spray, to a utility knife and a choker equipped with a hidden camera, which he never removed, except when he'd take a bath, Izuku claimed it was to record any crime happening near him, be it schoolyard bullying to hero-villain fighting. Hisashi gifted this technology to him for his 5th birthday. But it was a mother's job to worry. especially when your child's sleep was disturbed by night terrors almost daily. Izuku never told her about it. Though as a mother, and as a lawyer who specialized in abused children and domestic violence, Inko recognized the signs of trauma: shivering form, dilated pupils, teeth chattering, sweating buckets, the healthy color of his face paling to a sickly white. Izuku was never a crier. Asleep or awake, his face remained inexpressive. He spoke in an even monotone. Then it happened. It was such cruel irony. She prayed for her son to show his emotions, and God granted her wish with this. "I'm sorry." Inko held back her own sob as she held Izuku close within her embrace. He broke down and bawled, mumbling incoherent apologies over and over. "I'm sorry I failed. I'm sorry I'm weak. Give me a chance. Give me a chance before you leave me. Give me a chance to grow stronger so I can protect you once more." "But you're already strong, my child." Inko wanted to reassure him, yet the words stuck in her clogged throat. "You face each day with your head held high, even when others try to drag you down. Even if the world has branded you as nothing but an afterthought, you never falter. What is it that haunts you? What is it that scares you? Please, tell me so I can shoulder this burden with you." Midoriya Inko sometimes thought that her son was the reincarnation of Atlas. She was proud of the man he would one day become, and simultaneously worried that these unknown burdens would crush whatever light and hope he had left. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: typo is my most loyal fan, spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. Izuku's current age, 12 years old. Baited by Sapphire Phoenix. Thank you so much. The first time Tsukachi Naomasa met Midoriya Izuku, the boy was in a mini-market buying a pack of bubblegum. The clock was close to midnight. Naomasa was in the middle of decoding a report compiled by pro and underground heroes alike, regarding the Yakuza groups which still clung to existence. Specifically, the Shai Haki. They had threatened Japan long before the Age of Heroes and would probably continue to for years to come. It was harrowing work, sifting through the endless pile of paper reports and photos. His subordinates could understand when he stepped out of the office to take a breather. So, their Naomasa was in a 24-hour market and browsing the instant coffee aisle. The shop owner was an old woman with a bad back, close to 70, but still young in spirit. Typically, her grandson with a gravity quirk accompanied her, using his power to organize the shelves with efficiency. However, something held him up that night, and the old woman's phone chirped with a text saying he would be late for his shift. At that moment, only 3 people stood in line at the register, including Naomasa. The other 2 were a jittery man in a black hoodie and a kid with messy green hair tied into a short ponytail. Freckles peppered the boy's pale cheeks, and his eyes appeared bored. He was wearing a t-shirt with a picture of deer smack dab in the middle. Naomasa didn't think too much about his fellow customers, although he did a small double-take at seeing a child out this late at night. Perhaps the hoodie man was his father, and made polite conversation with the old woman to break the silence. After paying for his coffee, he stepped out of the line to depart. Then he felt the temperature drop. Naomasa remembered shuddering and wrapping his coat tighter around his figure at that time. Did the air conditioner break? Or was it the wind blowing in from a hidden crack in the wall? He shook his head and stepped out of the market, mind already back on the work still waiting to be finished. Should Naomasa had been less tired and a little more aware, he might have seen the man in the black hoodie cowered in fright, feeling towered over by a child that didn't even reach his shoulders. Somehow, the boy appeared much taller because of his menacing aura. If looks could kill, the man, a would-be robber from the half-hidden gun he tried to pull out from his jacket pocket, would be dead 10 times over. The old woman waved in cheerful ignorance when the man took off, not buying anything, and calling out a hysterical apology. As the door shut behind him, the temperature warmed back up, and Izuku quietly placed his bubble gum on the counter. The second time they crossed paths, it was far more memorable for Naomasa. Izuku was in the middle of calming a civilian down from a mental breakdown. His shift had finally over. Naomasa pulled the tie loose as he trekked home to his cozy apartment. Another dead end in the search for Shai Haki. If not for Sir Nightie's assurance that they were still active, he might have believed that the group had finally bitten the dust. Naomasa let out a tired sigh and trudged on with heavy footsteps, longing for another cup of joe the moment he arrived home. Before he heard a choked sob coming from the alleyway ahead and he stopped, instincts blaring like a siren. As he fingered the gun on his left holster, Naomasa peered around the corner, assessing the situation. He spotted a middle-aged woman whose hair was falling from its carefully tied bun, crying in the embrace of a green-haired child, a familiar green-haired child. Seeing nothing worth alarm, Naomasa was ready to let himself be known. But the kid beat him to it with a sharp glance in his direction. It almost seemed like the greenette had sensed his presence without looking. The boy whispered softly to the woman and helped her stand up, taking a careful step towards the waiting officer. "She's a victim, detective," he said. "Tone even," he continued. "A guy almost assaulted her. If you catch my drift." Indeed, he did, and Naomasa cringed. The pieces of the scene began to come together while he looked closer. No wonder she was hysteric. He let the woman latch onto his brown coat and cry her heart out, while Naomasa prepared to ask the kid for his testimony. Yet he was nowhere to be found. Apparently, the kid thought the problem was over now that she was with an officer of the law. And it took him a day to realize the significance of their conversation, however brief. How in the world did the kid know his occupation? He never even showed his badge. The third time they met, Naomasa finally learned the kid's full name. The detective blinked slowly and deliberately as he took in the appearance of the teenager before him. He was eating a bowl of katsudon with a flat gaze, waiting for the detective to start the interrogation. Aizawa Shoyuda, also known as the hero Eraserhead, had brought him to the precinct after finding Izuku in a back-alley dispute, again. The boy didn't appear to be doing anything illegal, according to Eraserhead. He just stood at the entrance, hands in his pockets. Two muggers pointed their guns at him, completely ignoring their first victim, who took the chance to escape. It was a bit strange. For any civilian in a dangerous situation, their first instinct should have been to run and get help. Except, Izuku did nothing. Even stranger, the muggers were the ones who looked scared, instead of the other way around. When Eraserhead jumped in to subdue the villains, he just kept on standing. Blank stare and not a twitch away. The underground hero didn't want to admit it, but he was a little unnerved and concerned about the mental health of Midoriya Izuku. No kid should be that calm in the wake of violence. If he had at least gushed over the hero's intervention like a fanboy, then it would make more sense. The complete lack of reaction sent up a red flag in Shuda's mind. Check the conditions at his home, he advised. He may be a victim of abuse. And Naomasa did. After letting the kid finish his meal and he asked for his name, age. A kid this small should never be out of the house this late. What were his parents thinking? Address and witness testimony. I was just passing through. No, I didn't see anything suspicious besides the obvious. No, they didn't hurt me, I'm fine. Yes, I just came back from that mini-market, buying another pack of bubblegum. Here's the video evidence of me not doing anything. Before it was the detective's turn to get questioned somehow. Did you enter the police force because you wanted to, or because your quirk pointed you to it? Naomasa finally brought him home. Izuku lived in a slightly rundown neighborhood in a 5-story apartment building. Vaguely, he also recognized it as one of the streets where Eraserhead often patrolled. Naomasa held back a moment, hidden by the stairwell, and observed the interaction between mother and son. So far so good. Nothing alarming. Inko pounced on her son the moment she opened the door, asking where in the world he was, how did he get out of the apartment, and why did leave in the first place. It's almost 1 a.m. Either the mother was a negligent parent, or the kid was just that good at sneaking out. Naomasa got a feeling it was the latter. He may not be a profiling expert, but the blind worry etched into her chubby cheeks showed the signs of a caring parent. Not a family problem, then. And not a negligence one either. Maybe problems at his school? The rate of child bullying in Japan was nothing to sneeze at. It had actually grown worse as the era of heroes and villains progressed. Wasn't that just ironic? Inko thanked him for his services and asked if her son had been a bother. Izuku might look uninterested in everything, she babbled, but when it came to quirks, he could be downright giddy. Not by his expression, just his questions. Some people found it endearing, and some people found it irritating. She didn't want to assume, but she hoped that Naomasa was among the former. He agreed without hesitation. In all honesty, the barrage of questions had been helpful. Izuku pointed out the weakness his quirk needed to cover while giving him a solution to the problem. Naomasa was almost inclined to invite him to the police force right then and there. It wouldn't do for such quirk analysis skills to be wasted, or to fall into the wrong hands. You said your quirk doesn't tell you if the answer is completely right or wrong, right? Izuku clarified as he finished the last spoon of his impromptu meal. It can't comprehend half-truths? Then ask straightforward questions. Better yet, ask only yes or no questions. Do a background check, create a plausible story, multiple stories, of a reason why they were arrested because, God knows, people love to cover everything as long as their reputation is intact and blame others for it. Not many victims are willing to share their sob story. Not if they have been betrayed again and again and again. Is that the reason why you won't tell me about yourself? Naomasa wanted to throw that inquiry back to him but was too afraid the boy would clam up. Shaking this thought away, he smiled at Mrs. Midoriya and coaxed her to relax. Her son was not in any trouble, as he hadn't used his quirk to help Eraserhead in apprehending the criminals. Just a civilian caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. If he had used his quirk, Izuku would have to face the law as a vigilante and would be put on house arrest, at least for the first offense. Beyond that, offenders could be detained and have to pay quite a sum for their release. Izuku quietly snorted in the middle of this explanation, a faint smirk marring his otherwise frozen face. That wouldn't work on me anyway. What? Inko, after giving her son a pointed look and a promise to ground him for a week onward, bowed and thanked Naomasa once more. They went inside and left the officer alone with his worrying thoughts. That last comment echoed inside his mind, like a deep gong in a summer festival. When Naomasa arrived back at the office, he immediately booted up his computer and opened the quirk database, ignoring the curious glance of his subordinates. As he clicked on a certain name, his eyes involuntarily widened. Midoriya Izuku. Quirkless. That wouldn't work on me anyway. At that moment he had only one thought. No. One meeting was chance, the second was coincidence, but a third. This kid was going to keep doing it, wasn't he? Sneaking out after his curfew and helping people in dangerous situations. It was unclear whether Izuku intentionally searched for trouble or if it was just blind, bad luck, but the end result was obvious. Tsukachi Naomasa groaned. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: typo is my most loyal fan, spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. Izuku's current age, 14 years old. Baited by Sapphire Phoenix. Thank you so much. Shota did not expect to be staring down a kid only a third his age. And, embarrassingly, he was losing the battle of wills. He liked to think his dry eyes were the reason for this crushing defeat, but both participants knew that was not the case. The kid's gaze was just too blank, even for Shota. It was illogical. Eraserhead had started the night with his usual routine, patrolling the neighborhood from above with keen eyes and his scarf ready to launch. He'd already stopped a couple of robberies and attempted murder and rape, and was thinking longingly of his yellow sleeping bag. He didn't know why this patrol was so full of crime. It was barely an hour past midnight, good lord. In addition, Nezu wanted the teaching staff to come to UA tomorrow, to discuss the new semester that was fast approaching. Meaning, Shota had to wake up early, and, with this much villainy on the road, there was no way he would get more than 4 hours of sleep. Up with the sun and an entire pot of black coffee, it seems. Forget Hisashi's efforts to wean him off the beverage, Shota and caffeine were linked by an irreversible destiny. He was prepared to jump to the next rooftop when the sound of a scuffle echoed from the alley below. Shota stopped short and peered down. There was a small figure, wearing a black hoodie with a cartoonish deer horn on it, darting around the ground and occasionally bouncing off the walls. The light hit him for a split second and Shota saw freckles adorning a familiar but slightly older face. Wasn't that Midoriya Izuku? The kid he encountered in another alleyway 2 years ago. Shota remembered him clearly. He remembered those dead eyes. Unseeing and face unmoving, enough that Shota worried for the kid's mental well-being. The underground hero simply watched from his vantage point for a moment. Izuku's movements were so smooth, Eraserhead thought he recognized his own style of fighting. Not exactly his trained art, yet similar enough. Quick and sharp for minimal waste of energy, and ready to fight back with a dirty jab if needed. The boy didn't need it. He kept one hand in his pants pocket, looking almost bored. And maybe that was why his opponent grew agitated, thinking some kid didn't consider him a real threat. Speaking of the unknown man, Shota's black orbs looked more closely. While Izuku continued to move under the streetlights, the other fought hidden in the shadows of the buildings. The kid was clearly trying to provoke him into the light, just to see him better, or was he trying to attract a hero's attention? Maybe a bit of both, and it seems he had succeeded at the latter. Fed up with this game of cat and mouse, the man let out a growl and shot forward, hand outstretched. It took less than a second for Shota to identify him, and his heart quickened. A beak-shaped mask. Chisaki Kai. The leader of the Shai Haki. He dropped down almost immediately and let his capture weapon soar. Kai paused in his lunge to blink in shock at the appearance of an actual hero. He ducked away from the scarf and jumped back, touching the brick wall beside him. There was a sharp crack, then a loud rumble, before the entire side of the alley crumbled. Between the cloud of debris and the civilians screaming inside, Kai escaped. Damn it, he was so close. One dead end after another in Naomesa's investigation, and Eraserhead had the head honcho himself in his sights. Shota stewed in his frustration while he evaded or let his capture weapon grab any rocks falling down. Fortunately, Kai had only destroyed the wall and not the foundation itself. Otherwise, they would be digging out bodies instead of a few injured civilians. At least they now have a lead. One of the Shai Haki's hideouts must be nearby to drag their leader right into the open on Eraserhead's patrol route. The question was why now, what was so important for him to take such a risk? Shoes squeaked on the asphalt, and Shota stiffened. Midoriya Izuku. His scarf moved once more and caught Greeny instantly, wrapping him up good like a good mummy. Izuku didn't struggle, just letting out a long, drawn-out sigh and stared back at the older man. Silently asking what did he want and please end this suffering, I need to go home, like, right now. There was no way Shota was letting him go after that. And so they were back in the precinct and waiting on Detective Naomesa, locked in a staring contest to kill the time. It felt like years until the officer had finally arrived, bringing more paperwork, information about Shai Haki and its leader. The two needed to update their information as soon as possible, while Izuku worked on a takeout bowl of katsudon retrieved by one of the subordinates. Shota slumped against the wall as Naomesa, after taking a fortifying breath, started Izuku's interrogation. Shota had noticed the detective's more direct line of questioning these last few years, and he filed the difference away. Sometimes, Naomasa would ask for clarification, although he generally stuck to yes or no questions that moved the interrogation along more quickly with his as he did right now. Are you doing your usual night walk? Yes. Did your mother know about this? No. Are you buying another pack of bubblegum from that mini-market? Yes. Are you intentionally seeking for trouble? No. Midoriya-kun? Fine. Yes. Why? Because I don't trust heroes. Why? Naomasa asked the last question they all needed to hear. The reason why Kai was interested in Izuku. It was as obvious as a day, now that Shota was in a controlled environment and not in the middle of a fight. Kai may have been trying to hurt Izuku, but he didn't look like he was trying to kill him. More like capture him. Did the kid know about this? And did he know the reason why? No, and maybe, Izuku answered, sipping hot cocoa while the adults received coffee. Apparently, this was not the first time Izuku had encountered people in bird masks. Just the week before, he had stopped an illegal transaction by threatening to call the police. While one of the criminals ran away, the other, the one with a bird mask, tried to silence him. Izuku described their quirk, hair that extended like a flexible arrow, weaving and cutting through the air, and said that he was preoccupied with dodging the vicious onslaught. He realized almost too late that Birdman was pulling out a gun. With a well-timed swerve, however, Izuku managed to avoid the bullet with only a graze upon his hand. It didn't really hurt. The bullet didn't seem to be laced with poison, but, from man's reaction, it was clear that the bullet was supposed to do something. Izuku had heard him mumbling, "It should have worked. Why didn't it work?" before he disappeared into the night. So, I think that's why they were trying to catch me, Izuku shrugged carelessly. If he noticed the gaping jaw of his interrogator, then he wasn't going to comment on it. First of all, why didn't he report this to the nearest police? Izuku had threatened the criminals with it already. He should have followed through after the illegal transaction was broken up. Second of all, how the hell could he know if the bullet was poisoned or not? Why didn't he go to the hospital for a thorough checkup? How could he just dismiss a near-death experience? Regardless, it seemed that the kid had been on Shai Hakai's radar for a while, and again he didn't see the point of telling the officer about this. Kai must have wanted to know more about the individual who turned their strange bullet, whatever it was supposed to do, into a dud. Shota did not want to think about what might have happened to Izuku if he hadn't arrived in time. Didn't want to think about what could happen to the boy if, not when he refused to entertain that possibility, the Yakuza managed to capture him. Didn't want to think about those blank eyes in another context. Didn't want to think when those dead eyes turned even deader, if that was even a word. Naomasa ordered Tamakawa to send Izuku home. It was almost 2 a.m. now, after wrangling a promise from the kid to contact them if he encountered anyone in a bird mask again. Alone in the interrogation room, the detective and Shota settled in to tackle the investigation with new evidence. It was silent, except for the sound of pen scratching paper, both adults occupied by their own thoughts. The silence was finally broken when Eraserhead, putting his report down and looking straight at the detective with a gaze that was almost judging, murmured, "You seemed awfully familiar with that kid, Tsukachi." He remembered starting the conversation with that. "Mind telling me how often he does this? How often did Izuku put his own life in danger?" Naomasa let out a weary huff and said, "He never stopped after the first time you brought him in, Eraserhead." Shota was pretty sure his brain just blanked out after that. Especially when Naomasa claimed they could do nothing about it, as his actions were not even technically illegal. The kid never physically fought back. He didn't use a quirk. Didn't even have one in the first place. So, no matter how he involved himself in an intense fight, just like an hour ago and a week ago, apparently, they could not punish him. The law would chalk it up to self-defense. At that moment, Aizawa Shota promised himself. If the law could not stop Izuku from his nightly routine, then the least he could do would be watching over him. What a problem child. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: typo is my most loyal fan. Spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back-alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. A/End baited by Sapphire Phoenix. Thank you so much. Nezu was intrigued. And as anyone who was familiar with the UA principle knew, an intrigued Nezu is a dangerous Nezu. His attention was something that many students and alumni had learned to avoid. It started when Nezu overheard Shota grumbling about a problem child in their first staff meeting of the year. He observed that the underground hero had consumed twice the usual amount of coffee and that the dark bags under his eyes were more prominent than ever. At first, Nezu idly attributed this to hero work keeping Shota up later than he should be. And the disgruntled teacher was not looking forward to another batch of students he would have to screen for a modicum of potential. But a day later, and Eraserhead was still mumbling about one specific child under his breath, one who was adding so much more to his workload. This, Nezu thought, called for deeper investigation. So he followed Shota. Not with his own feet, of course, but through the CCTV cameras around the town. The network was child's play to hack. Nezu was not hailed as the most intelligent creature in of all Japan for nothing. He also brought forth a couple of drones reserved for the UA entrance exam to complete this side mission, hidden within the trees, where he knew no cameras were installed, but in the same area where Eraserhead often patrolled. Within his office, Nezu sipped his tea in contemplation and watched as Shota perked up suddenly. A sigh escaped from the hero's lips before he leapt from building to building, and then down to the street below, landing feet first upon a man's back. The villain was threatening a green-haired teenager with his knife quirk, demanding that the boy to fork over all of his money, although switching to a closer video feed and rewinding 30 seconds, Nezu considered that he appeared to be rather sweaty, as if the villain was more terrified by the situation than his victim. With one chop to the back of his neck, the villain was unconscious, and Shota gave the boy a piercing glare. Problem child. So, this is Shota's newest trouble. Midoriya Izuku, a third-year student from Aldra Junior High School. Diagnosed quirkless, but with an IQ that, perhaps as he grew older, could even rival Nezu's, Shota was not the only one who could spot potential. Hobbies included quirk analysis and cloud watching. At a cursory glance, one could mistake Izuku for a normal student, aside from an unusual predilection for late-night walks. Insomnia, Nezu wondered. Izuku did not have the same eye bags as Shota, though. And yet he often stayed out until 2 or 3 in the morning. The principal hummed, flicking through old CCTV footage, and found several recent encounters between Shota and the teenager. Then he identified the reason why an underground hero like Eraserhead would be following a plain-looking, quirkless civilian. According to police files, which Nezu easily obtained, Midoriya Izuku was being pursued by the notorious Yakuza group, Shai Haki. Not to mention, he was of personal interest to Chisaki Kai himself. No wonder Shota was losing sleep. No matter how the man tried to hide it with his grumpy exterior and harsh tone, everyone knew that Aizawa Shota had a weakness for children. He cared so much that he would rather crush their dreams of heroism than watch them grow up to be mediocre heroes and die in action. Nezu steepled his paws in thought. A child with uncanny intelligence and perhaps training in several martial arts, constantly searching for trouble in the middle of the night, being pursued by a high-ranking villain. Plans started to form inside the principal's mind. An intrigued Nezu was a dangerous one. Shota blanched and let out a stream of curses when his boss approached him and asked to meet Izuku as soon as possible. The Midoriya household was quite homey, with happy family photos hanging on the wall and a variety of deer miniatures and plush dolls were strewn about. And he means a lot of them. Perched on top of the television, sitting on the living room furniture, even drawings of deer were attached to the fridge. They were cartoony and childish enough to be a clear indicator that this obsession must come from the boy. Izuku reinforced that point when he came around the corner, cuddling another doll to his chest, while drinking green tea from a mug with a deer sticker on it. It was hopelessly adorable. And Nezu might have developed a small, true smile at the sight. Izuku's appearance almost distracted him from those dead eyes. Eyes that a child should never have. "Hello, my name is Nezu. Am I a dog? A mouse? Or a bear? But more importantly, you're the principal of UA." Izuku finished the introduction for him. A curious gleam shone within those green orbs. "Sorry if this is rude, but what do you want from me?" Not one to mince words. Then, Nezu didn't need to lay out Izuku's nightly escapades in detail. It was clear that Mrs. Midoriya had her suspicions. Not to mention that Naomasa or Shota had kept in touch with the mother to help ease her worries. She knew some of what Izuku got up to, but she could not stop him, and grounding him meant nothing. The boy could be very rebellious, a thing Nezu appreciated in humanity. So Nezu went for the big guns. He wanted Midoriya Izuku in the UA hero course, preferably in Shota's class. Izuku's answer was, "I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome, predictable." Shota had already informed him of Izuku's dislike toward this profession. Nezu would not surrender so easily, however. He was stubborn, oh, he really was. One had to be to survive in this cruel world. So, he kept on bargaining. And Izuku kept on refusing. For Shota and Mrs. Midoriya, it was like watching an intense tennis match. Back and forth, each side refusing to back down, even if they had to push the other into a corner. Then Nezu pulled out his ultimate move. In time, he explained, Izuku would be perfectly safe within Island's security. But that position did not include his mother, who had a steady job and was making a name for herself on the legal side of the law. Not to mention young Bakugo, his childhood friend who aspired to be a hero. Izuku already had a target painted on his back. It would not take long for Chisaki Kai to pursue his family and friends. Izuku was smart enough to realize this. Being targeted by the leader of a notorious Yakuza gang was a serious business, especially for a civilian. The moment he had landed himself on that man's radar, on any dangerous villain's radar, really, everything changed. This wasn't just about him anymore, but his neighbors and known associates as well. The Shai Haki would not hesitate to use such leverage to get him. Nezu knew Izuku knew. And Izuku knew that Nezu knew he knew. The child's expression may be unchanging, yet his mind was whirring. Those green orbs flickered, weighing any options he had in this situation. "I can drop my job for you, Izuku." "No. Being a lawyer means too much to you. I'm not going to let your dreams fall apart just because of my stupidity. If only I hadn't tempted fate." The principal could almost hear him thinking. If only I had just played at being normal a little while longer, then perhaps we could have continued to live a peaceful life. Privately, Nezu believed that a normal life was impossible for the boy. A cruel destiny would always follow the path of genius. Izuku let out a deep, weary sigh, one too old and tired for someone so young. "I know you're blackmailing me," the kid started, finger pointed accusingly at the principal. But Izuku also knew that Nezu was right. So, he negotiated, or demanded, to be exact, that Izuku refused to participate in any of the mandatory courses. He would only show up for attendance. He was already busy with projects for his father's company, practically employed, even though he was still a child in school. Nezu could understand the demand for Izuku's skill. Quirk analysts were highly sought after, with new powers cropping up in the population every day. According to Nezu's personal research, Izuku was good at it. Maybe more than good, if the director of Island himself was asking for his input, and Nezu was not ashamed to admit that exploiting that skill was one of the reasons he wanted Izuku in his school as well. The boy also said that he would decline the invitation to move to Island for the sake of attending UA, but he could not refuse the job because they had already paid in advance. Doing that, while having to attend hero lessons and complete rigorous schoolwork would be, in his words, far too troublesome. Lastly, Izuku swore that he would not be on track to get a hero license, no matter what. He didn't care if UA fell under scrutiny for admitting a quirkless student into the hero course. Izuku was not going to budge on this. He absolutely refused to involve himself in any hero versus villain bullcrap. Nezu nodded in understanding and calmed Mrs. Midoriya over her child's rather direct words. He did not yet know why Izuku hated the hero industry. Did they hurt you? Did one of them betray you the way I have been betrayed? But he would not push his luck. It was simple enough for Nezu to gather information on the boy, and he suspected that would come back to bite him in the butt if Izuku had the means and technology to research Nezu in return. Was he paranoid, to be wary of a teenager? No, Nezu had not missed the glint of real anger in those green eyes, a clear indication that Izuku would not hesitate to take his revenge for being forced down the path he so desperately wanted to avoid. While the principle of UA would appear as clean as a whistle online, Nezu did not want anyone digging into his past without his consent. When the two shook hands to seal the deal, Nezu realized that this fight was not over. Izuku may have agreed to his offer, but he did not expect the boy to follow along easily. He would most certainly continue his nightly walks, even if he had to break through every rule and barrier that UA placed in his way. Nezu tried to keep his grin in check. Midoriya Izuku was an intriguing child, indeed. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: Typo is my most loyal fan, spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. Baited by Sapphire Phoenix. Thank you so much. Izuku's current age, 15 years old. Tashinori first encountered Midoriya Izuku standing in the middle of the school hallway. In one hand, the boy carried a paper bag filled with notebooks, while the other clutched a deer plushie close to his chest. Yagi Tashinori, better known as All Might, blinked in stupefaction. It was normal to cross paths with a teenager at UA, of course, but the new semester had not begun yet. They had just finished testing students with a hero's recommendation that morning, judging whether they were truly worthy of acceptance into UA high school without having to pass the normal exam. Perhaps the boy was one of those 5 students? But Tashinori could not recall seeing such unusual green hair. Then the said boy turned around, perhaps feeling Tashinori's gaze on the back of his head. Now that they were facing each other, the pro-hero was certain he was not one of the recommendation students. Freckles peppered his pale cheeks, and green eyes blinked lazily as the boy chewed on a piece of pink bubble gum. With little to no change in expression, even at Tashinori's sunken form, he popped his gum and said, "Mind giving me directions to the teacher's lounge, All Might-sen?" Tashinori nearly spits out blood. How? He wanted to ask, yet his throat clogged at the very last second, causing him to sputter nonsense instead. His body automatically guided them to their destination. Nezu had called for another staff meeting this evening, while his thoughts ran in panicked circles. How did the boy recognize him in his civilian persona? Did someone at UA accidentally spill the beans? Or had Tashinori himself exposed the secret one day by changing back while there was an audience? This was bad, wasn't it? Before he could even decide how to initiate a one-on-one conversation with the boy about his secret, a door opened. It seemed, while he was trapped inside his own mind, they had arrived at the teacher's lounge. Everybody was there, tables and chairs arranged into a circle. Tashinori saw confusion on their faces as they realized there was an unknown student at the number 1 side. Except for Nezu, who leaned back in his chair with satisfaction. And Shota, who let out a long-suffering sigh. Without hesitation, the boy took a seat beside the smiling principal, then let his forehead drop to the table, garnering another bewildered look from his associates. Nezu stood up to address the room and explain the presence of the young stranger before any questions could be raised. His name was Midoriya Izuku. He and his mother lived in the recently constructed UA dormitory, which would be open to any students who desired to stay on campus. Izuku, who was supposedly very good at quirk analysis, would be assisting the school as an unofficial counselor. No, he was not a student of any program, be it support, general studies, or the hero course, though he would be placed in Shota's class. The man groaned loudly at that. Yes, he was essentially freeloading on UA's goodwill. And yes, his decision is final, unless you want to have young Izuku's death on your hands. Toshinori felt the information click into place, while the others gaped at the boy who may as well have been sleeping at Nezu's side. He remembered now the ongoing case which had consumed Detective Nail Mesa for several years. Whenever they met, his friend was sure to complain about a certain child adding to his workload. Often enough, the story was practically burned inside his mind. This boy was the target of the infamous Yakuza group, Shai Haki. Nezu was not exaggerating when he said they would be signing Izuku's death warrant if UA turned him away. Now, with that out of the way, Nezu clapped his tiny hands. The tone of his voice made the hair on Toshinori's neck stand up and everyone unconsciously straightened their backs. Let's start with the reason why I called you all here. Midoriya-kun, the floor is yours now. Izuku stirred back to life, grumbling as he unglued himself from the table. He put the plushie down and stood up, rummaging through his bag to give each one of them a spiral notebook. Shota's half-lidded eyes opened wide the moment he read whatever was written in his. Hizashi let out a startled scream and uttered a soft curse. Toshinori himself coughed up blood almost immediately. Toshinori's notebook was filled with information about him, not just as Toshinori, but as All Might as well. About his life, his quirk, how his quirk functioned, and any weaknesses that might entail. And there were suggestions for improvement too. How to take better care of his health, how to use his quirk more efficiently. A paragraph also mentioned pills that Chiyo, known as Recovery Girl, would make sometime soon. What pills? He asked the woman who sat right beside him. She showed him her own notebook. Izuku, a teenager, had outlined the recipe for a new drug that consisted of powerful stimulants and nutrients, such as rice, various flours, dried vegetables, and fruit seeds. It would grant the patient enough energy to keep going 3 hours beyond their endurance. Toshinori was expected to consume this medicine only in emergencies. For example, if he has to put down a villain at full power when he was already past his limit. As soon as the effects wore off, he would plunge into complete and utter exhaustion. No more than 3 pills in 24 hours, the notebook warned, or the repercussions for his health could be dire, possibly a coma. Clearly, consuming this willy-nilly was not an acceptable option. While demanded to Izuku, who made this observation list, Nezu-san already said I'm going to be a quirk counselor, didn't he? Everything written down? That's my work, buddy. And Chiyo asked if people will develop a dependency on this pill. No way. The backlash is too severe. I made it taste like a mud ball too, just to make them less appealing. Toshinori's mind was full of questions once again, his lips pursed in worry. Honestly, how the hell did this kid know about his dual forms? How could he possibly describe how All Might's quirk worked with such accuracy? At least he didn't know that this power could be passed on to someone else. A bit of a relief there. So, Toshinori finally asked. With a wary gaze on the boy who knew too much, he voiced the main question the hero had been thinking for the last couple of minutes. Izuku just stared at Toshinori like he was an idiot. Nobody has ever seen you outside of battle, even with that big form of yours. That means you live far away from the city? Or that your quirk is a transformation one like Mount Lady? I eliminated the first option because you're always in the area when there is trouble. Can't have a teleportation quirk because it does take you a minute to join the fight, so definitely a transformation quirk. Then there's your height. Blondes are everywhere, but someone as tall as you? That's a rarity in Japan, if you discount those with a mutation quirk. Izuku crossed his arms and one eyebrow rose. Frankly, I'm surprised nobody ever put 2 and 2 together. Just because Yagi Toshinori and All Might appear physically different, that doesn't mean you should forego all discretion. At least clip back your bangs with a pin or something after you change into your civilian form. That hair is your most telling feature. Honestly, troublesome hero? Well, when he put it like that, Tashinori blushed in embarrassment, chastising himself for his stupidity. A few inquiries from the other heroes, double confirmation about something or other written down, and then finally the meeting ended. Izuku took back his notebooks, saying he would burn them as a precaution. You haven't memorized it? Too bad. I'm not going to jeopardize your life by leaving this stuff laying around for any villain to find and exploit your weaknesses. Come find me if you have any questions. The boy then declared he was ready to go back to his room for a nap. Before Izuku stepped out of the teacher's lounge, however, he tilted his head to one side and threw out one more mind-blowing revelation for them to chew on. Do an investigation on Endeavor. If you can't recognize child abuse that obvious, then you don't deserve to bear the title of hero. Then the door closed, leaving them all in a shocked silence and contemplative silence. Yagi Tashinori remembered, between coughing up blood and wiping up sweats, that Hisashi had spoken the words they were all thinking. He hated us, didn't he? Nezu cheerfully nodded. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: Typo is my most loyal fan. Spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back-alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. Baited by Sapphire Phoenix. Thank you so much. Momo simply blinked in surprise when Midoriya Izuku appeared, unabashedly whining behind a teacher who dragged his feet in exhaustion. It was the day of the entrance exam, and UA had invited the recommendation students to watch along with the staff if they wanted to. It was a unique opportunity to view their potential classmates and to judge their capabilities for hero work. Momo sat at the very corner of the observation room, chatting amicably with a white-haired boy when the door slammed open, causing everyone present to immediately seek out the interruption. That was when she noticed the homeless-looking man, dressed in shabby black clothes, and was hiding his face behind messy, limp hair and a long scarf. Momo surmised that this adult could only be one of their teachers, knowing this office could only be entered by the aforementioned staffs, and a hero, likely an underground one. The boy he dragged along with him, however, looked to be around her age, green hair tied in a simple ponytail, and clutching a deer plushie almost childishly, was someone she didn't recognize. They were embroiled in a fierce argument. About the man not respecting boundaries, about the appropriate time and place to nap, about yellow sleeping bags and hypocrisy. The other teachers just listened with amusement, so this was likely a common sight. Momo wondered who the boy could be. Another recommendation student? Was he late to his own exam? Izuku, she heard his name, ended the display by walking up to the monitors and letting out a small hum. Someone caught your interest, little listener? She heard present Mick's voice ask. Izuku grunted this time. His finger pointed to one of the screens, he opened his mouth, and a flood of information poured out. Momo was pretty sure her jaw dropped open, and the other students looked equally thrown. It was outrageous how the boy broke down each examinee, personality traits, visible quirk, chances of success or failure based upon their performance, approximate final scores. His comments might not have been 100% accurate, but he did sound confident as he spoke, and the teachers were nodding right along. Vaguely, Momo wondered if Izuku had an intelligence or clairvoyance quirk to help with his observations. One of the conversations she remembered so clearly was where Izuku spoke about one particular student, who looked like he was failing, where he could actually showcase his powerful quirk more easily if this exam is not biased towards those people with a flashy quirk, troublesome society. Then that same student saved a girl who was trapped under the rubble caused by the absolutely insane zero-pointer. Izuku seemed unamused. His blank eyes glared hard at Nezu, while the creature himself grinned in faux innocence. Momo had to agree with Izuku. Some students might have had powerful quirks, but deploying a robot as tall as a skyscraper was just overkill. Once the exam finished, the underground hero ushered everyone out so the teachers could tabulate the participants' scores. The green-haired boy trailed behind them, yawning while he embraced the plushie even tighter to his chest. He really did look like a small child, acting like that even though he was the same age as Momo, and his eyes were full of pain. Inesa, the friendliest of them all, decided to strike up a conversation. His booming voice echoed in the halls. He gushed about how cool the entrance exam was, how cool Izuku was when he guessed almost everything right, and how that quirk of his will help him a whole lot in a writing exam. He must have been the smartest person in his previous school, and I don't have a quirk. And everything screeched to a halt. Inesa blinked owlishly as Izuku yawned once more. His eyebrows rose in a challenging manner, like he was ready for mockery or a look of pity. Perhaps, if Momo hadn't seen him in action. How Izuku broke down every student's quirk with a single glance. How, when Present Mike returned from the field screaming in excitement, he neutralized the presenter's deafening screech with a sharp jab to the throat. How he threw a small wad of paper down the barrel of Snipe's gun with unerring accuracy, causing it to backfire and disrupt the increasingly violent debate between Snipe and Vlad King over student placements. Momo would never admit it, but her lips quirked in amusement as the two teachers coughed with their faces covered in soot. Present Mike did not have the decency to restrain himself and laughed with a hand still to his throat. If Momo hadn't witnessed all of that, she might have felt the urge to mother hen Izuku. Quirkless did not equal useless, she knew that. But it did mean he's another normal civilian for the heroes to protect. It was clear, however, that Izuku would protect himself. With a mind like his, collecting information in seconds on how others' quirks ticked. Momo didn't think it would be wise to underestimate this normal-looking kid. She knew the other recommendation students felt the same. And the atmosphere had become uncomfortably chilly the moment Izuku announced that he didn't have a quirk. It felt like the very air itself was bearing down on them in a threatening manner. One wrong move, one wrong word, and they might never breathe again. Inesa shook his head furiously, denying the unspoken implication of prejudice. He even went so far as to prostrate himself in a Dejiza bow. After Izuku made a small sound of acknowledgement, the chilly air dispersed. Inesa stood back up. The teen continued to speak loudly, although Momo could hear some hesitance in his voice as he asked the question on all their minds. "Why are you here then?" Fortunately, Inesa managed to make it sound more like a curiosity than judgment. His personality was too straightforward for that. Izuku leaned back on his heels and closed his eyes. He answered in an even tone, yet it almost sounded like a gong of doom in her ears. "Because UA thinks that forcing me to attend this school is guaranteed protection against any villain's attack." What? They did not get the chance to ask for further details regarding his ominous words, however. Aizawa-san appeared to shepherd them to their next destination, while Izuku broke off toward the building she vaguely recognized as the new dormitory. Did he live there? Momo hadn't realized that the boarding house was open for the students to move in. If that was the case, maybe she should bring it up with her parents again. If they knew Momo wouldn't be completely alone, maybe they would support her desire for independence. The oddity of the student named Midoriya Izuku would never be forgotten. But for now, Yaoyorozu Momo let herself be distracted by thoughts of her future, and of convincing her overbearing parents that their daughter was finally ready to spread her wings. A/N It's pretty predictable which student Izuku was talking about there. This chapter existed solely to introduce that student too. No, he doesn't have OFA. He helped Ochako by lifting up the boulder, high enough, the girl could crawl out of there. If you want to know, OFA is in Kirishima's hand now. This story is not a complete AU, I want to keep it as canon as possible. I want Night Eye to be mad all might for not listening to him, so I need a black sheep for him to vent his frustration to lol #sorry about that Kirishima. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: Typo is my most loyal fan. Spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back-alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. A/N, if you still haven't figured out what anime I crossover this fanfic with, then here it is. I dropped a huge big hint for you guys, laughing face. Tenya was affronted at the blatant disrespect Midoriya Izuku shown toward their homeroom teacher. At first, he didn't think too much about him, too busy admonishing the brash blonde over his rudeness to the predecessor of their school by putting up his legs on the table like that. He doesn't look much. Green, wild hair, tied into a simple ponytail. Too busy sleeping on his desk and letting out a soft snore. The rowdiness of the class didn't bother him. When Bakugo Katsuki, the rude boy, aggressively introduced himself amidst their arguing, accidentally crashed the legs of his chair towards the table, he still didn't budge. Maybe Greenie was too excited over the fact that they are now attending the famous hero school of UA? That he stayed up late and didn't get enough sleep? Tenya understands he was excited too. But the teen should at least try to take a well-deserved rest in this new semester. Giving everyone a first good impression and all. Even that purple-haired boy had his eyes open, although the bags under his eyes begged to differ. Then their teacher came like a butterfly trying to come out of the cocoon but to no avail. He took one look at their bewildered faces, had an expression of asking the god above why did they tortured him with this responsibility, and ordered them all to go out into the field. Totally ignoring the orientation they should have attended right about now. Katsuki leaned back on his chair and rapped the granette's desk. Zuku, he heard the blonde said, woke up and yawned, rubbing his eyes so he could get his sight back. It was just a normal interaction between associates. Yet Tenya's orbs instantly landed on his uniform. Or rather, at the black hoodie with deer horns under the gray blazer, clearly a violation of the uniform regulation of the prestigious UA high school, not to mention the choker on his neck. What? Before he could scold him for that, however, Sensei had snatched Zuku's arm and dragged him outside, grumbling about problem child being a problem. Katsuki followed, cackling madly all the while. Tenya thought their teacher is going to reprimand him for the obvious offense. But no. Shota just led him to the field and leave him to his own accord. He didn't change into his PE uniform, he didn't even join on their quirk apprehension test. Just continuing on his previous activity and napped under the shadow of the surrounding trees. He didn't understand. Wasn't a teacher's job supposed to be straightening the unruly student at moment notice? Fortunately, Tenya was not the only one who was confused by the blatant ignorance. The boy with a tail quirk raised his hand and asked exactly that. Shota took one look at the sleeping teen then huffed. The "I'm so done with this" expression was back within a second. That's Midoriya Izuku. He's not a student of UA. The answer caused a hushed whisper to echo. The confusion didn't disappear. Instead, it grew even stronger. Then, what is he doing here, if he's not one of them? Tenya wanted to clarify, but the test had begun. Why is he wearing the UA's uniform, even if it wasn't a complete set? Is he one of the teacher's child? What senior high school he attended? Shouldn't he be there then? Instead of loitering around other people's school? It was nagging at the forefront of his brain. His body may move on its own to finish the test, but his mind was wandering around, questioning the existence of this laid-back teenager. So, after his eyes caught the score on the scoreboard, letting out a sigh because he was not at the very last place and in a danger of getting expelled, then letting out a bigger sigh when Shota said it was all a logical ruse. He could feel the purple's boy relieve from over here without having to crane his neck to look at him. Tenya marched forward. Izuku was in the middle of stretching his body when he landed a palm on his shoulder. The word, "May I talk to you?" was already on the tip of his tongue. Before his sight blurred, body felt light. And the next second he was already on the ground, staring right into those blank, dead, green, orbs while a tip of something sharp ghosted under his chin. Everything went dead silent. He heard someone choked on their own saliva. Seeming to realize he just judo throw one of his classmates to the ground, and no real danger in near vicinity, Izuku pocketed the knife. No. That didn't look like a knife. It's a kunai. He didn't know someone still makes those in this time of ages, back into his jacket's hood and stood up, looking down at Tenyo with half-lidded eyes. Sorry about that. I'm not good with ambushes from behind. My reflexes just kicked in. Izuku scratched the back of his nape, troublesome. But next time, if you want to talk to me, try calling my name instead. You're lucky I'm not completely sleeping, or else my weapon will gut your throat out without mercy. He didn't hear Izuku said that specifically, yet he heard the insinuation anyway. Izuku walked away with Katsuki right beside him, thumping his fist to his friend's chest and was congratulating him for the scare of the day. Every student of Class 1A was frozen on their feet. Their brains still could not process the shocking scene they saw just a minute ago. He gulped. From that day onward, Tenya promised not to needlessly antagonize Midoriya Izuku anymore. If that means turning a blind eye to his offense against the school regulation, then so be it. It's not like he's a killer in disguise anyway. As long as he's not hurting anyone, then everything is good. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: typo is my most loyal fan. Spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. And here's another hint for you guys. Or not a hint but an actual answer, really. Guys, I got another awesome fan art. Check it out. noverb13.tumblr.com/post/1893830981199/fanart belongs to Claire Dimlight. I got another. Ochako promised her parents that she'll have some fun in this new school. Don't think about our income, honey. Let your parents support you for now, instead of the other way around. So, she decided that befriending every single one of her classmates is the first step to do. Most of them are charming, easily accepting her bubbly demeanor without complaint, except for a couple. Todoroki Shoto was too cold, figuratively and literally. Kaminari Denki was a pervert, although he does know his boundary, backing off the moment the girls rejected his invites. Shinsho Hitoshi is socially awkward, not used to someone acting genuinely nice to him. And Midoriya Izuku slept most of the time. How did he do that? Wasn't sleeping too much is not good for your health? He's going to get a severe headache. That was okay. They have a year to spend, plenty of time to break their walls. Today they are having a battle trial, a class taught by the magnanimous All Might. Ochako was not the only one who fangirled at the sight of the number one hero. And she was definitely not the only one who was excited at the prospect of wearing their hero costume. Everyone practically stormed to the front and grabbed the aluminum briefcase in a hurry. While the cheerful girl was waiting for the classroom entrance not to be crowded by chattering classmates anymore, ready to head for the changing room, she noticed All Might had stopped Izuku from walking away. An apologetic expression marred the hero's always smiling face as he thrust the same aluminum case towards him. All Might said Shota knew about Izuku's morning and evening practice, and suggested that, rather than fighting an unmoving log, he should fight a moving student instead, to judge if his complicated moves work with normal people. Izuku's unblinking face turned annoyed in an instant. He saw me handle those villains already. He knew I can protect myself. And what's this? She remembered. Izuku mumbled, accepting the briefcase with an irritated huff. I don't remember submitting any hero costume design. Your mother did. She saw your doodle and said she wanted you to at least wear clothing that'll protect you in your daily night walk. I feel like my own mom is conspiring against me now. What a drag. Izuku had told them a bit about himself yesterday evening, to the curious classmates who wished to know him better. That he didn't have a quirk. And the move he did to the bespectacled teen was just him using his own strength. His deadpan gaze was a clear insinuation that he was waiting for a jeering comment right there. Must be thinking that now they knew he didn't have any power, they'll stay away from him like he was some kind of an infectious illness. Though honestly, after Tenya's glorious smackdown that morning, none of them will ever react with anything but awe. He literally brought someone taller, bigger than him down to the ground even without looking. How could they not call it manly? Borrowing Ijiro's word. The thing was, that small conversation between Izuku and All Might she accidentally eavesdropped reminded Ochako about Izuku's status as someone without a quirk once more. What did it mean then? When he said he saw me fight those villains already? And his daily night walk? As Ochako fussed about her costume being completely different than her original sketch, she heard him grumbled before she could see him. And when she turned around, she couldn't help but gasp in wonder. Izuku stood there, clad in black, tight-skin armless clothes under a gray flak jacket, accentuating his upper muscles for the world to see. Along with a squiggly tattoo drawn on the left arm, was that a real tattoo? She hoped not. Ida was constantly having an aneurysm with Izuku's disregard towards school regulation. He's going to have a heart attack one of these days. 3 pouches circling his back, waist and foot were covered by open-toe boots that reached his knees. Izuku was in the middle of tightening the metal arm guards that snuggled his elbow-length gloves close, before fingering a sword strapped on his back in a nervous manner as well. Some kind of an animal-looking porcelain mask was perched on the side of his head. The shape reminded Ochako of a deer, especially with that large ears and short horns. He really loves deer, huh? Every day, there'll always be a deer peeking out on his person, be it a print on the clothes he wore, a pin strapped on his blazer, a water bottle with a deer cap on it, a sticker on his notebooks, and so on and on. All in all, he looked marvelous. Ochako definitely didn't blush. She instantly had a thought. Wasn't this a perfect condition for her to start a conversation? She didn't know his likes or dislikes for them to have an animated talk, except deer. But a little complimentary won't hurt. So, Ochako jumped with a squeal, attracting the others as well. She widely smiled towards Izuku, who leaned back in apparent shock, and gave him just that. A compliment. Some of them came crowding closer too. Ijiro whistled in astonishment, saying that he never knew Izuku was this ripped because he wore baggy clothes wherever he went, and that was true. He always wore a hoodie or t-shirt under the UA blazer. Never a white shirt along with a red tie. Hagakure pointed out that his costume reminded her of Aizawa-sensei's. And Siro added that he looked like a ninja instead, with all the black in that sword. Ochako heard Izuku's breath hitched, so soft that she thought she was imagining things. He closed his eyes and pulled the mask down, prohibiting them from seeing what kind of expression he made as he spoke. That suits me a whole lot better than being a hero. Everyone blinked in confusion. Ochako had a plan of how to befriend everyone ready after the first day of the school, categorizing which students should she talk first and which students should she left last. Denki is easy. He's easygoing as long as she ignored his perverted comment here and there. Hitoshi just needed another week of positive attention for him to open up, for him to show the world that he wanted to have fun just like everyone else did. Shoto seemed to be the hardest to approach. He didn't give her any chance to speak, as whenever she tried, he turned his nose to the side and briskly walked away. So, she thought she'll tackle Izuku after this. He seemed nice, aside from yesterday's slip-up. Yet that simple comment made Uraraka Ochako realized that maybe, just maybe, Midoriya Izuku is the toughest one to crack here. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: typo is my most loyal fan. Spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand to those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. / baited by unfaithful undertone. Denki may be stupid academically and physically, but emotionally? From the moment he stepped into the 1A classroom and watched the students mingle, he instantly knew Midoriya Izuku was depressed beyond measure. He also realized Todoroki Shoto was a tightly bound ball of anger and bitterness. He didn't dare to approach him as he did Izuku. Denki never worked well with the emotion called wrath. The first time he tried, they just punched him in the face and shouted at him to mind his own business. He never tried again after that. Sadness, however? Denki gaped when Izuku mercilessly decimated Katsuki in their one-on-one fight. Jumping around as if the walls were trampolines, blending into shadows like he lived inside their inky embrace. How he fought dirty, kicking between the legs, that's not manly man, or aiming for the throat. Momo distractedly mumbled, of course, that attack is useful asides from silencing present Mike Sensei's quirk. And how his strike just missed a vital area that'll give him the best advantage. Everyone knew Katsuki and Izuku were childhood buddies, even if the brash boy denied their friendship vehemently. He didn't mean anything bad by that, by the way. Katsuki was just being a tsundere. They overheard them discussing their daily morning spar before the battle trial started, Katsuki complaining about how hard it was to contact Izuku since he didn't live near him anymore, how he was so looking forward to this class to make up for the lost time. Clearly, from their movements, both boys had been dancing to this tune from a very early age. That Katsuki could predict which body part his friend would target if the first one didn't work was impressive, even when some of them were a miss. Denki winced when Izuku finally smacked Blondie over his head with his sheathed sword, leading Katsuki to become acquainted with the wall face first and went unconscious. Denki was pretty sure he was not the only one thinking, is he really quirkless? And, glad I'm not the one who had to fight Izuku. After all, a cornered animal is a dangerous animal, and that was what Izuku's fighting style reminded him of. A cornered, sad animal, however, was an absolutely terrifying beast, be it for themselves or others. Denki was not a therapist, he didn't think he could ever be one in the first place. Not because of his quirk, but because he couldn't filter his words to soften the blow for the life of him. Yet talking was a balm to the soul, even if they didn't touch on the problem of his depression in their conversation at all. Denki was a good listener. Or so he hoped. He could never leave those broken people alone because he knew that all-consuming pain. He knew, as he was in that place not that long ago. Maybe he still was. Before he could think a way of how to strike up a conversation with Izuku, the teen came to him like an omen from beyond the grave the next morning. Catching him so off guard, he was pretty sure his jaw just dropped. Izuku spun the chair in front of him and sat down, watching him with those blank, dead eyes. You can't control your quirk, can you? It was embarrassing to admit. Denki tried his hardest not to make a fool of himself in the first month of UA, at least not before he found some real friends. And Izuku caught onto that fact already, within the first 2 days too? He may appear nonchalant, but he was really observant apparently. So they'll about how Denki's power worked, how he could counter the effects of overuse to tips and tricks to use it better. Rather than letting your lightning randomly wreak havoc, try to make yourself into a lightning rod. You're immune to electricity anyway, right? That's one way to attack someone, by electrifying them with a physical attack. The other is to use support items. Forget about those stupid heroes who said support items are for cowards. Quirks and support items are only tools to assist you in your work. Nothing more, nothing less. No matter how cool your quirk is, it's useless if you can't use it. Just like how useless it is to have a katana but never sharpen it. I already submitted a design of a suitable item for you, Izuku said, spreading 2 sheets of paper on the desk. One was a drawing of the item. It looked like a normal ring. 8 of them, and the other was how to use them. There's supposed to be 5 sticky balls of metal stored inside. He could throw them by opening the hidden panel under it, like flicking a marble. He could focus his electricity on the marble and his power would strike in a straight line. He could perform a ranged attack by spreading the marbles around the enemy, so he could attack without fear of hurting his allies. Power Loader offered to create a disc version of it so it'll be easier for you to use, but I digress. If you never learn how to push yourself, then you won't progress. You'll be stuck as a one-trick pony. I don't like heroes, but if you want to be one, I'll make sure you'll be a damn good 1-inch. He never heard Izuku talk this much before. It was a bit jarring. Turned out Izuku became an absolute nerd the moment quirks and their applications came up. Denki heard Katsuki snort from his seat. At the end of the day, he realized a bit too late that Izuku was the one helping him instead of the other way around. And he really helped him dearly when their trip to the USJ was sabotaged. That he now had to fight for dear life against these villains who were ready to kill them all. Turning the happy, educational lesson into an invasion ruled by chaos, horror and mind-numbing terror. The output of the electricity may have been a tad too much, and his aim was questionable at best, yet the rings supported him a lot anyway. He didn't have to overuse his quirk and be a liability to his teammates. Nor did he hurt them just because. Kaminari Denki swore to thank Izuku after this fiasco ended, then to seriously think of a way to get him to talk one of these days. Because, God forbid, he may not be a therapist. He saw Izuku's quick smile as Denki babbled. A smile so bitter and sad. Who are you seeing when you talk to me, Midoriya-kun? But forcing a victim to talk is never a good idea. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: typo is my most loyal fan. Spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back-alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. /imbued by unfaithful understanding. People often called Tsuyu an expressionless human being, even with her natural, doe eyes. She didn't mind. It actually gave her a bit of leverage when she spoke too directly towards her opponent. People heard her even tone and saw her unchanging face and knew she didn't mean anything bad whenever she asked for clarification. Just a mere curiosity. Denki had asked her about this skill of hers after he saw that exact scenario at today's lunch. She bluntly told the upperclassman that his zipper was open. The senior laughed out loud and thanked her earnestly, even though people started sniggering at him. His gloomy-looking friend sighed as he scolded him. Just because he kept losing his clothes as a side effect of his quirk, didn't mean he had to lose his dignity as well, complimenting Tsuyu on her straightforwardness, then begging her to teach him how to do the same. Where he could speak his mind out loud and have no consequences befall him. He could not handle Kyoka's wild attitude any longer, hitting him on the head just because she didn't like the thing she heard coming from his mouth. The punk girl then punched him for that comment, grumbling about insensitive boy while Denki whimpered. Tsuyu giggled softly at their comedic performance, answering Denki's request with a "why not ask Izuku?" Everyone knew both of them are friends now, especially after he helped Denki in bettering the control of his quirk. The other classmates asked for his input too, of course. Knowing Izuku's tips had helped the class clown a whole lot within a day. That even Aizawa-sensei complimented Denki for the drastic improvement. The only one who didn't ask was Shoto. Izuku was friendlier, or easier to approach, now that he had bestowed his knowledge upon them all. People started to include him in conversation whenever they could or invited to lunch if he wanted. But he was still a lot closer to Denki than anyone else, Katsuki not included. Maybe because Denki was the first person Izuku willingly spoke to, or because the electric teen has the worst control of his power that he wanted to keep a tab on him. Maybe a bit of both. Back to the topic. Izuku knew how to keep his emotion in check, If he bothered to wake himself up and not be buried by his own paperwork full of complicated essays and calculations. She saw him smile before. Annoyed or intrigued appeared once in a while, usually when he was absorbed in Quirk's theory and its application. He can express himself. Yet decided not to just because. Conclusion, Denki should have learned from him then. Tsuyu was literally born with this face. It was not something she could teach to other people. This is a skill a hero should have anyway. No civilians wanted to be saved by a stuttering or panicked hero. Denki's grin petered off to nothing and he immediately went silent. Not in agreement, but hesitation. His yellow orbs flitted to the sleeping Izuku who sat beside him, resting his head on the metal railing. Regarding the Greenette's presence on this trip, Shota and Izuku had a fierce argument on the way to the parking lot this morning. The teacher didn't want him to come, not when he was safest inside the UA's wall. But Izuku completely ignored him, climbing into the bus then proceed to nap. She never saw her teacher looking so frustrated before. Katsuki snickered evilly in the background. Denki faced her once again and shook his head. Speaking with a voice so soft, she almost couldn't hear him amidst the roaring bus. I don't think that's a good idea. Tsuyu remembered feeling confused at that, blinking in wonder. Questioning the sudden drop of mood. She didn't manage to ask the reason why though. Katsuki, who sat at her side, decided to roar in frustration at that moment, annoyed at Eijiro's inquiry over his opinion towards this trip. The red-haired teen laughed unabashedly at his reaction, prompting the other classmates to tease the brash blonde for his personality. Tsuyu slyly joined in. And the weird conversation she was having with Denki not just a minute ago was forgotten. At least until USJ's raid happened and the girl thought, maybe this is why? Because right now, as she was frozen in fear when the villain with hands, Shigaraki Tamura, reached towards her face, ready to turn her into dust, Izuku appeared. Figuratively teleported. Deer mask down and sword finally unsheathed, he used the other hand to push Tsuyu down. Eraserhead. The villain's hand was severed, right at the wrist, blood spraying the air in a haze of red. She heard Hitoshi breath hitch at the gruesome sight. A portal quickly opened, swallowing the man-child and his severed hand, whisking him away from the bloodthirsty hunter, student. It didn't hinder Izuku. He just zoomed past the flustered villains and went for the big boss. Hitoshi clambered to the girl's side, asking with a trembling voice if she was okay, if watching someone's limb getting severed so close to her face was okay. If getting his blood splashed on her face was okay. She didn't answer, even when he hastily pulled her away from the field as the battle heated up. Shota was crushed under Nomu's large hand and Izuku tried to attack the exposed brain yet could only graze the flesh before the monster backhanded him right on the face, causing him to crash into the lake. Even when the Greenette, bloody, battered and limping, his mask cracked in half and barely hanging on by the thread, kept on fighting, this time, throwing a bunch of kunai and shuriken from one of the numerous pouches. Even when All Might came and launched the Nomu into the stratosphere, the teachers had arrived and saved them, she didn't answer. She couldn't answer, because she was too busy crying. And she didn't know the reason why. Was it for the terror she witnessed with her own eyes? For the sheer brutality her classmates unleashed upon the enemy? Or was it for the dead gaze of Midoriya Izuku? The resigned, despair, guilt, that whirled upon his uncovered face at that split second before he shut it all down into his usual uncaring expression? I don't think that's a good idea. Denki said, yellow orb flitted to the ground as he bit his lip. I don't think he even wanted to control his own emotion in the first place. Hitoshi awkwardly patted her back as he let Tsuyu sob. He didn't want to, but he was forced to. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: typo is my most loyal fan, spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, Being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back-alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. Hitoshi groaned when he saw the entirety of Grade 1 in front of the classroom. Of course, these kids will be here. After hearing the fiasco of USJ invasion, of course they wanted to scout their main competitor. Hitoshi understands. He really did. If he was not lucky in that entrance exam by gaining a lot of rescue points and have to be placed in general studies, he may be one of these people. Standing around with jealousy evident on their faces. Just because they have flashy quirk. Just because they won the lottery in the genetic, now they are an aspiring hero? But then Hitoshi was lucky. He is one of the students of the hero course. He was present when those villains ambushed them. And he was there when everything went to shit. Why couldn't they just leave them alone? Give them space to breathe. Sure, the recognition they get was flattering. Mina and Denki were having a blast for the attention. Yet even the socially awkward Hitoshi recognized the nervousness in their manner. How they looked over their shoulders, making sure the people standing behind them were their ally. Every single one of them was jumpy. And half of his classmates were stuck staring at their phone screen, messaging whoever it was that kept stubbornly pinging them on. Hitoshi himself just finished on informing his mother not to worry, he will go home soon after he passed this obstacle. No, it's not another villain attack, Mom. I'm okay, seriously. The blonde-haired teen, Minoma Nito, stepped forward. What could be insults were right at the tip of his tongue. Before Midoriya Izuku emerged from behind the class, the biggest deer plushie he ever saw, it was as big as Izuku's torso, was cradled lovingly in his embrace. Any girls present in this impromptu meeting let out a whisper squeal. Hitoshi admitted Izuku looked cute there. With his small stature and messy locks, he looked like a child who just woke up from a nap. If only they knew that same hands of his had chopped a limb of another human like it was a mere piece of paper. He apologized at Hitoshi and Tsuyu this morning. Guilty, for traumatizing them both dearly. But he never said he was guilty for harming the villain. For a slight possibility that he just doomed a man for holding anything with both of his hands ever again. Nito, after blinking incredulously at the sudden sight of a figurative child in their midst, was now back to his sneering contest. Mocking him for playing with a doll instead of training to be the best hero out there. Izuku's answer to that was a loud yawn, completely disregarding whatever he just said. The greenette fished out his phone from the hoodie pocket and started dialing, totally ignoring Nito's demand to pay attention to him, speaking with an even tone the moment the person from the other side picked up the call. Hello. Izuku said, remember about our discussion to hire a professional therapist for the school? Can you hold the meeting for a while longer? I think I'm going to be late because troublesome kids decided to trap us in our own class. Nezu-san, oh damn. He called the principal? Their shoulders tensed in fear and one of the students had already run to the other hallway the moment that name registered in everyone's mind. Hitoshi knew Izuku is weirdly chummy with all of the UA teachers but he didn't know he had the bear/rat's number on speed dial. Izuku nodded or shook his head, agreeing and disagreeing at whatever Nezu had asked. At some point he perked up, blinking in wonder before he let out a long sigh. Izuku lowered down the electronic device from his ear, pressed the loudspeaker button, and showed the screen to everyone present. The face of Nezu winking was evident for them to see. Hello, dear students of mine. Yup. That was definitely the voice of their principal there. They unconsciously stood straighter as Nezu spoke. Headmaster cheerfully asked them to let Class 1A go. That the parents have been contacting the staff of UA since this morning, asking about the credibility of the school's ultimate defense after the disaster of the media's storming and USJ invasion. Inko, Izuku's mom, even threatened to bring him to the court if her son was 1 second late. A deliberate pause there. Then he continued, voice even more chipper yet somehow, sounded even scarier than before. So, why don't you all go home? Don't want anything bad happens to you if you piss off the wrong person, Predictably, everyone dispersed like a Red Sea, face pale and body trembling. Izuku mumbled troublesome mother and turned to his classmates, informing them to visit a therapist the school will provide sometime soon before the sports festival begin. This is a mandatory visit. Do not even try to skirt around it, he will know. Facing those villains was not an easy thing. Hitoshi saw his green orbs flitted to the cowering Tsuyu, and bottling up your feeling just for the sake of not wanting to show weaknesses is the opposite of being manly. Taking care of yourself is the first step to be a respectable hero, even if they won't talk about the experience to the said therapist because they felt uncomfortable to open up to a literal stranger. Family and friends were a respectable choice for them to talk to, though Izuku still wanted them to get help from a professional. People who knew how to handle paranoia and night terror. Finished with the pep talk, he yawned once again and finally walked away from the commotion. The crowd from other classes was slowly thinning after Nezu's admonition. Only a couple of them were still standing around, probably curious with the enigma of 1A. Or his proposition of the new staff that'll handle their mental health for tomorrow piqued them. But now that the shock of a fact that a supposedly normal student was actually their principal's favorite kid had receded, one of them moved. And surprise, it was Nito. He let out a low snarl, stepped forward with purpose, ready to snatch Izuku's wrist. Before a loud whir of machine echoed. And tons of kunai were now right in front of Nito's face. The Platinum Blonde's teen choked in fear, the spectator behind gasped in shock. Izuku stood there, dear plushie thrust to the fore. Instead of staring at a cute doll with fluffy fur, however, they were met with dangerous weapons instead. It came out from the open belly of the toy, showing them the mechanical engine inside. Izuku was twisting the deer's horn with a steady knuckle, and was in the middle of pulling it apart from its place. His tense stance showed that, once he did, it'll send those kunais flying, putting holes in Nito's whole body and ending his life in an instant where even Recovery Girl could never heal his injury. Izuku's tone didn't waver. It was still unchanging and monotone as he said, "A hero should never play with a doll." He turned the device off, staring uncaringly when Nito's leg gave up. He now was sprawled shamelessly on the tiled floor. Izuku turned his nose, dear plushie, back to its original state as he hugged it tight and mumbled back, "Not like I'm a hero anyway." Then he walked away, leaving them all with gaped jaw and widened eyes. Hitoshi always reminded himself that Midoriya Izuku is someone not to be trifled with. It began with his retaliation towards Tenya's sudden approach. The one-sided match he had with Katsuki in the battle trial. How he easily broke every single bit of their quirks factor and gave them tips to improve their performance. Then the USJ. He may not be a proper student of UA. Yet it relived Hitoshi anyway that Izuku is on the side of the law. No matter how disgusted he was with the concept of hero and villain, it was visible. His hidden kindness, that is. How he easily put himself in danger as long as his classmates were okay. How Izuku was the only student unlucky enough to get injured because of that, Eraserhead not included. Class 1A knew he was strong. He knew quirk means nothing to a determined person, but sometimes Shinsho Hitoshi forgot. That Izuku is just a normal human. That nobody could ever face that horror without flinching even once. Maybe, the one who really needed a therapist here is not them, but Izuku. After all, an uncaring person won't bring a lot of weapons in a safe location, right? Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: typo is my most loyal fan. Spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. Itsuka was confused when she saw Midoriya Izuku on the commentator booth instead of joining them all in the field as a competitor. She didn't know what to think of the green-haired boy from the next class. At one point, she was wary with the prospect of dangers he silently promised. Nito flinched whenever he saw Izuku walking through the hallway, whether he brought the dear plushie or not. Aside from that, he still mocked Class 1A as much as possible though. While at another point, she knew he must be a good guy, based on his classmates' reaction towards him. Pretty protective too, especially that brash-looking blonde, watching him move like a hawk. She heard he was the kid who got injured after the USJ disaster. Was that the reason why he was in the commentator booth right now then? How terrible his injuries were that the recovery girl could not heal him completely, that he had to sit this competition out. Midnight Sensei cracked her whip to silence the clamoring spectator, causing her attention to settle back on their rated 18 teacher. She introduced herself as the referee of today's tournament, along with present Mike, Eraserhead and Midoriya Izuku as their commentator, so that's the reason why he was there. But still, why him? Before the game started, however, she asked them all to give a big round of applause. Because Bakugo Katsuki, the students who got first in the entrance exam, will give them an opening speech that'll hopefully hype them all. The brash boy Itsuka saw as Izuku's appointed self-bodyguard stepped up to the stage, his red orbs blared. The sight alone felt like he was seeing them right through their souls as he spoke with a flat tone. My friend almost died. Way to shut up the audience there. Everyone was silent when Katsuki told them about their experience at the USJ. Being surrounded by people twice your size. That they won't give them any slack just because of their young age compared to the villains. How a wonderful underground hero such as Eraserhead didn't escape the fight unscathed. How even the strongest students of Class 1A was reduced to nothing but a reporter from the side. Izuku then interjected that he didn't want to join anyway. Don't try to pin the villain's action for his decision. Katsuki ignored him. By the way, nobody disagreed over the idea that Greenie over there is the toughest in their midst, apparently. Except for the boy with heterochromia, who scowled in denial. Strong quirk means nothing if you don't have a head to use it efficiently. Rather than using the power straight on, be creative. Go for the ingenuity. Just because no flashy power was used, doesn't mean they're useless. He took a deep breath and glared at every hero available. The glint inside was full of determination, so God forbid. If you pro heroes are here to search for a flashy quirk just for the sake of it, then get the fuck out of here. I can't say anything about other people down there, but I'm not here to accompany you in playing around with the media's every fucking whim. I'm here to be a hero. And he stopped the speech there. That was flaw. Itsuka was speechless. She knew the danger of being a hero, of course. The news of heroes or villains' death are there, no matter how the world tried to soften the blow. Yet, deep inside herself, she believed she had time to grow up. To strengthen and psyched herself up so she'll be ready when she had to bear the title of hero. But here Katsuki was, crushing that notion into nothing by not censoring any of the battles they, unfortunately, had to fight. If only he spoke that speech with a proud face, she'll dismiss it as him boasting himself up the pedestal. That this brash-looking teenager was just those type of people who craved for action. Who loved to showcase his power in confidence while looking down on the other. Instead, he almost looked defeated. Katsuki actually cared, his uncouth words aside. Itsuka watched as the honorary student had a quick wit with Izuku for the second time, teasing him for admitting to the whole world that they are definitely friend. Present Mike laugh could be heard in the background. The audience were whispering, some of the heroes actually looked embarrassed. Like Katsuki's speech just now has struck them deep. And she could see why, even related at it a little bit. Maybe at the sudden talk of Class 1A wonder, where her friends complained over the fact that people seemed to forget there was another hero course in UA school, had clouded her perception. That she was swept along the wave without her noticing. It made Kendo Itsuka forget the true definition of a real hero. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: typo is my most loyal fan. Spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. It happened 10 minutes before her match started. Somehow, Power Loader Sensei caught onto Mei's hidden ploy just by watching her interaction with Tenya, where she offered him to equip one of her babies so they'll have a fair match. The older man didn't confiscate her support equipment. She's a student from support department, after all. Their items are their weapon, but he indeed snatched her mic away. That won't do. That piece of equipment was the bone of her work. If she didn't have that, how could she show off her beautiful children to the member of the support company out there? The viewers screaming will bury her word like a forgotten laundry she left back home. She couldn't create a new one either. Her stingy teacher had banned her from visiting the workshop in the middle of the festival and will ask Midnight to officially disqualify her if she ignored his warning. That won't do then. She had to find another way to present her creation without igniting Power Leader's ire. Mei perked up and an imaginary bulb lighted up on the top of her head. There is an available microphone here, wasn't it? And Power Loader only prohibited her from visiting the usual lab, right? Not any other room? So, with a manic grin and an evil laugh, she opened the room to the commentator booth as silently as possible. Her eyes zoomed in on the target, a spare, wireless microphone, right there, on the box at the corner where it was lay forgotten. The hosts were busy with their own thing. Present Mike enthusiastically hyping up the audience, Eraserhead sipped on a hot coffee, while Midoriya Izuku kept on snoring yes. He had been sleeping since the start of the sports festival. His snore echoed from the loudspeaker installed on the field. Mei thought of a plan. A good way of how to go there unnoticed, grab the mic, and back to her own program. It took her a while. Then she decided to ran inside like a raging bulldoze anyway, startling the teachers away as she disappeared from their sight, cackling madly all the way. Now, she was having the time of her life. Showing them her beautiful babies without hesitation, capturing the right attention from the right spectator. Mei was in the middle of explaining the wonder of her capture gun when another voice suddenly echoed. But what if the villain managed to cut the nets with a sharp object and escape? Her head snapped to the origin of the sound in an instant. There, on the commentator booth and across the transparent glass, Izuku finally woke up, watching the match with a small smirk and half-lidded eyes. The fact that their third commentator finally deigned himself worthy to, well, commentate caught everyone off guard. Before his question registered in Mai's mind and a wider grin blossomed on her white, rosy cheeks. Challenger? Is he a challenger? They won't. As you can see, the net will shrink and wrapped around their bodies, giving them minimal space to struggle. But Ida is not completely incapacitated there. I can still see him moving around. A space is a space, no matter how small it was. If he's the type of person who hides weapons in every inch of his body, he can easily reach for one and use it to cut the web still. And what about someone like Ashido Mina? She has acid quirk. It'll be a piece of cake for her to melt the net. Oh my god, he is. And that was how the rest of the match went, to everyone's complete confusion. Where Hatsum Mei displayed her babies for the world to see, Midoriya Izuku poked holes at her design and trading ideas after ideas to make them better, while Tenya was suffering on the side. This is definitely the best day of her life. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: Typo is my most loyal fan, spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, Being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back-alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. Shoto licked the strawberry lollipop while staring at anywhere except the smiling Nezu. Izuku sat right beside the headmaster, shuffling through a bunch of paperwork while muttering up a storm. Frown marred his usually expressionless face. How did this happen, he asked himself once again. It was right after the end of the lesson, when he was busy contemplating which agency he should pick out for the internship. Endeavor name was emblazoned at the second place of the list. He didn't know if it was intentional or not, but that gave him a bit of wicked satisfaction. Someone tapped his shoulder, and when he turned around he was met with the unchanging complexion of the green-haired teen enigma, Midoriya Izuku. Shoto had a complex opinion of him. Izuku is quirkless, meaning he'll never endanger his dream in reaching the number 1 rank without using his fire side. Yet he's also strong. His fight with Katsuki, the second one strongest in their class in the term of raw power, was cold, hard evidence at that. Not to mention how he kept on going even though the Nomu cracked his ribs and twisted his ankle. Shoto didn't know if he really was the toughest in their class like everybody unanimously agreed, though he acknowledged that Izuku is a whole lot durable than a normal civilian supposed to be, a preconception people with flashy quirk tended to have. Pity he couldn't measure Izuku's own power against him, as he didn't join the sports festival. He understands, the Greenette was never one of them. His classmates tend to forget just because he attended the school with them. Didn't mean Shoto wasn't disappointed with the outcome, however. Right now, Izuku asked him to come along, walking toward a direction where their principal's office was located. Now, he knew he was not on a friendly term with his colleagues. Friends and emotions will only hinder him in fulfilling his wishes to be the best. Yet he was not actively antagonizing any of them either, except when he challenged Katsuki to fight him seriously at yesterday's competition. Which, apparently, not using his fire means he didn't follow his promise through. Katsuki was an angry ball of Pomeranian, but he never saw him that furious. So, the brash blonde did his best to force him into using it. He succeeded in doing that by almost rupturing Shoto's eardrum if he didn't instinctively activate a burst of flame to protect it. Was that the reason why Nezu wanted to see him? Shouldn't he ask for Katsuki though? He was the one who got irritated and endangered the safety of one of the students. Well, no matter. He's here now and Nezu wanted him to relax by giving him a strawberry lollipop. Izuku sat near the headmaster, pulling out a couple of paperwork from inside one of the drawers, then spread it on the long table, asking Shoto a question he never knew someone would ever ask. Is Endeavor abusing you? Shoto was glad Nezu didn't give him something to drink or else he'll choke on it. Greenie didn't give him any time to respond, he just continued on listing the crime of his sperm donor, willingly injuring his family in a pretense of training, endangering the safety of other with quirk overuse, bribing law enforcement to swept up any complaint he got. Not like he could ever hide anything from me, Nezu proudly declared. They had been accumulating evidence after evidence to bring him down for the past 2 weeks. A hero's job is to protect. If he cannot start with his own family, how could they trust him to defend the citizen alike? Then? They only needed Shoto's consent regarding this, Izuku clarified. If he agreed to it, however, he had to be present in the eye of court and become one of the eyewitnesses. Tsukachi Naomasa-san, a police officer with a truth quirk, will be present. Meaning, no point in hiding anything just because he feared Endeavor will enact a punishment to him for trying to stand up against his injustice. Izuku's sure they won't lose this fight. They've been scrounging any info they could on Endeavor. And even if he did keep his job intact after this fiasco, it'll put a black stain on his supposedly unmarked papers. The Committee on the Rights of the Child won't allow him and his family to come back to that bastard's clutch. Not if he wanted to face Nezu's wrath. The said creature cackled gleefully. Shoto was speechless. To think there existed someone who realized what a rotten asshole Endeavor is. That his title as a hero was nothing but glorified sunglasses. Is this a dream? No, it hurt when he pinched his arm. Someone really tried to help him. After years of hurt and despair, will he finally see the light? where his brother and sister could also breathe the air of freedom. But then, "Fight me!" Katsuki roared, swinging his fist right under his jaw. The audience of the sports festival was deafening, yet Shoto could still hear him screaming, "Treat me as a villain if you must, I don't care. As long as you limited yourself and won't use your full power, you will never be a fucking hero." But then he wanted to be a hero who saved people. Not the one who only cared about money and rank. Never like his father. So, his decision was clear. He didn't like it, but he knew he could endure it for a while longer. Shoto refused. He didn't want them to report him. At least, not until the internship ended and he managed to control his fire quirk. Not until he became a real hero. Izuku bit his lower lip, like he wanted to rebut him, and convinced him to think twice. Before he let out a long sigh, mumbling something within the line of "troublesome kid and their selfless tendencies." He reached to the back of his nape and unclasped his choker from his own neck, offering it to Shoto. It contained 5 hidden cameras inside, and the moment he wore it, the said cameras will turn on and recorded anything that occurred within 10 radius miles. The camera will stop recording every time he stopped wearing it or when the day ended, before it picked up again 1 minute after that. He can also tap the choker twice for an express delivery, acknowledging that vibration equals it's time to send the video signal as well. Hisashi, Izuku's father, made sure this accessory is elastic, meaning it'll snuggle their neck close. The wearer then won't accidentally jolt the choker and send a wrong order. This support equipment used a homing signal. So, no matter where he goes, the footage will be sent directly to Izuku's phone and computer. He ordered Shoto to wear it whenever he was home or Endeavor was there alongside him. Indeed, it was a breach of privacy, but for the sake of Shoto's health, he didn't want to risk it. This is to calculate if Endeavor's action towards his family will stay as it was or worsened. And when it did, I'll burst into your house along with several policemen. Your wish not to apprehend him be damn, he remembered, Izuku said. Fingers interlocking as he put his chin on it, eyes blazed with determination. I won't let an abuser get away with their crime. Again. As Todoroki Shoto dazedly stood in front of the principal's room closed door, still reeling over the fact that someone cared. Someone really cared, choker already tied around his neck, he thought. Midoriya Izuku is a vengeful guy, his uncaring attitude aside. He didn't blame him, even if Izuku did it in a misguided attempt to pay for his sin. A sin in which he unknowingly, it must be unknowingly, someone as intelligent as him, who managed to pinpoint Endeavor's real face where everyone else couldn't, would never let anyone with a fate like him suffered alone, ignored his former friend's plea of help. Shoto didn't mind. Actually, maybe. With this, both of them will get the peace they so vehemently needed. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: typo is my most loyal fan. Spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. Stain thought bombarding the city with a lot of Nomu was a bit overkill. But then, if he said that to Tamura's face, it'll be like calling pot kettle black. After all, he killed the fake heroes almost every day now for the world to see. So, they'll realize this society is never a rainbow and sunshine. Today should be like any other day. Him, patrolling across the border while eliminating those he deemed unsuitable to be heroes. He didn't suspect anything. Even after the League of Villain extended their help, a kid in robot suit tried to fight him in the name of vengeance and failed. He didn't even care about the wounded native. Disgusting. Then his friends, a boy with red hair and another with heterochromia, came to help by punching the ground till it caved in, or sending a spike of ice that reached the sky, he still thought today will just be like any other. But right at that second, the dread came crawling in. The night was cold, yet somehow, it turned even more so. Something invisible pressing him down, cutting the air circulation that choked him till it almost hurt. A warning signal, get away, get away. Run, 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 save yourself, blared inside his mind, that he was torn between fleeing or stay rooted. As he was contemplating what kind of quirk that could make him felt so small, a feat even a stronger, bigger fake heroes he fought before couldn't do. The students from UA and the dying hero was long unconscious from the change in the atmosphere alone. Stain suddenly stood ramrod straight. His sharpened reflex was his only saving grace when a bunch of short knives, no not knives, it was kunai, flew to him, intended to put holes on every inch of his body but failed. Stain didn't have the time to take a breather either when a bigger hurdle came once again, clashing their sword with his own, sending spark across the darkened alleyway. Now that they were stuck in this close proximity, Stain had ample time to observe the one who had managed to catch him so off guard. It was a boy. Judging from the height, he must be the same age as these students of UA. He wore tight-fitting black clothes and a gray flak jacket. The open-toe boots didn't make any sound, be it that the soles were created for a stealth purpose or this kid's step was just too quiet. A deer mask with unsmiling lips covered most of his face. The only thing he could see was the blank, dead green eyes boring right into him, peeking from the eye hole of the headpiece. Stain managed to thought that was the eye of a murderer, asterisk before the fight continued on. He didn't know how much time had passed. Their fight felt like an eternity by how fast the pace was. A slash here, a thrust there. A dirty kick between the legs, backhanded him across the face. Deer jumped and ran on the wall. Was there a spike on his boot? No, maybe sticky substance because there were no puncture holes on the brick after he ran on there, asterisk asterisk. Almost gutted his stomach with a kunai if Stain didn't see him shifted ever so slightly and leapt back at the very last second. Although that move made him stumbled a bit, shocked that a kid half his age didn't even hesitate in dealing a fatal blow. Kid assassin is unheard of in these days and ages. After all, Yakuza groups were in the brink of extinction too. The boy succeeded in injuring him on the cheek with a needle, Senbon, for that mistake. The tense air was still there, still choking and weighing him on. This must be the kid's quirk. Not a flashy one, but super effective in cowering the villain down. Stain blocked a batch of shurikens as he dashed forward, ready to indulge the boy in another close combat. But his eyesight suddenly swayed, black dots swam on the peripheral of his eyes. Before his legs turned to jelly and he crumpled down, dual katanas clattered noisily to the dirty ground. What the hell? Stain grunted. What happened? He couldn't move, he couldn't even twitch his finger. The tense air that had been clinging onto them had evaporated the moment he was down, so not the work of the child's quirk either then. Was it poison? The stray Senbon that nicked his cheek came to mind and he cursed out loud. Was that tiny needle laced with paralyzing poison? Think it. Using the equivalent of Stain's own quirk on him. He never realized how scary it was not to have your limbs listening to you. Now, he understands the reason why people tend to be wary of him the moment they knew how his quirk worked. Deer walked closer, stepping onto the fallen swords with enough force that it actually snapped in half. Stain gnashed his teeth in agitation at that, willing his consciousness to be aware for a moment longer. Just so he could ask the kid a question that had been plaguing his mind for the past couple of hours. Who are you? Deer crouched, peering down on him and tilting his head cutely like a curious kid should be. Then he saw the blank, dead orb and it reminded him once again that this kid is not the usual wannabe. He hummed minutely, lifting up the ninjato and said, "Just another killer." Stain never dreamed of losing against anyone other than All Might. He is the true hero after all. He should be the one who stopped the hero-killer reign of terror. But then lose he did as he stared right at the weapon swinging down onto him before his vision went black. And Akaguro Kaizome knew no more. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: Typo is my most loyal fan, spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. Kenji, the chief of the police force with a dog head as his face, thought this was the most cut-and-dry case ever, yet complicated at the same time. Hosu incident had doomed the entirety of civilization into a mass panic. Nomas were everywhere, destroying buildings and hurting others. Every heroes that were present was able to help, of course, even calling for those from another region. Then Mizushima Masaki, known as Hero Manual, had to banish that celebration by frantically reported that Stain was in the area and his intern Ida Tenya was nowhere to be seen. That name rang an immediate bell. Ida, the previous victim of the hero killer. He didn't die, but his career as a hero was done for. Tenya, Tensei's younger brother, was gone. Stain was near the commotion. That could only mean the bespectacled boy had pursued the maniac and was on the way to exact vengeance. Fortunately, Ijiro was smart enough to send a direction to Gran Torino's phone, pointing them to the exact location where the battle had ensued. When the older man, with a couple of heroes available, arrived at the scene, their hearts skipped a bit. 3 of the UA students were there, slumped lifelessly on the cold, hard ground. Along with an injured native, propped to the wall, and Stain curled in the middle of the carnage. They thought everyone was dead, that they were too late to assist the brave, foolish children in their quest of restraining the villain. Manuel shakily kneeled to the unmoving Shoto and pressed his fingers on his neck, before he let out a long, relieved sigh and tell the other no. They were okay. Just unconscious. Even Stain. That was what he heard from the witnesses as Kenji gave each of the kids the hardest glare he could muster. What they did was completely reckless. Stain had killed a lot of heroes, stronger, capable heroes, and they thought just because they had a flashy quirk, they could beat him? Rather than facing him up close, they should have stayed behind and called the other. Ijiro protested and said they couldn't leave their friend to die while waiting for help, then used their power to bring them away from the danger. Rescue, not retaliate. Shoto could glide using his ice. And Ijiro had trained to use his power efficiently since the start of his internship, boosting his legs and gave him an equivalent speed of the Ida family. They should use that strategy instead to snatch the victims, in this case, Native and Tenya, away from the battlefield and ran out of there as soon as possible. These naive children bowed their head in shame when he laid that obvious solution to their face, aware that they've done goofed this time around. Kenji huffed, not in anger but exasperation. This is the problem of hero nowadays. Immediately went for the fight response instead of flight. Sure, their reason was noble, admirable, and he was impressed anyway that they could last against Stain for a while. Yet that will also be their doom one of these days. They should have realized the main job of a hero is to save others. Didn't that brash blonde named Katsuki implied so in his speech at the sports festival? Luckily, they beat Stain before the hero killer could deal vicious damages to them, and gave Native a first aid treatment that saved his life even though they were focused on the fight soon after. Kenji got their permission to let the heroes have the recognition instead of these students, not wanting the media to cauterize them for illegally using their quirk and be jailed even though they only wanted to save their friend. As he turned towards the door and was ready to go back to the office, Shoto distractedly murmured, "But I don't remember defeating Stain. Nor did I treat Native. Was it you, Kirishima? Nua. Maybe a hero came to finish the job? Now, that was intriguing. Did that mean someone else had saved the day? Did the kids were actually knocked unconscious before they managed to defeat Stain? Then whoever it was had defended them. Then where is he? Or why were they not there when the heroes came along the corner? Stain put and gave them an explanation of what had happened in that alleyway? Either it was an underground hero who doesn't want media recording their existence. Or it wasn't a hero in the first place at all. Vigilante? He thought the paperwork won't increase now that the problem of illegal quirk use was over. But it seems that wasn't the case. Tsuragami Kenji groaned. What a complicated mess indeed. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: Typo is my most loyal fan. Spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. Tomorrow is the day for final exam and Higuri, known as Power Loader, is so not looking forward to this. Nezu changed this year's plan at the very last second. Instead of fighting robot like it used to be, he wanted the students to fight teachers instead. It was clear, from USJ Invasion and Hosu's incident, that villains nowadays were a lot more vicious than ever. Headmaster wanted the students to be ready. He wanted them to know how to use their quirk efficiently to another human instead of brutally destroying a machine and cogs. Nothing too mind-breaking. In fact, everyone kind of expected this. However, tomorrow was Class 1A turn to attend the exam. And boy, they simultaneously groaned in defeat at that. But only one obvious answer to that obvious question. Midoriya Izuku. The green-haired kid was an enigma since the day he came to the teachers' meeting and blown every inch of their quirk apart that day. He was smart, he was agile, he didn't like hero, not saying everyone should love this occupation without complaint. It was just weird for a kid not to have any fascination towards it, especially as his own family sang compliments almost every day, and was a target of a high-ranking villain for some reason. Higuri never really gave him any more attention than the usual students. Not only Izuku wasn't in his class, but he was also busy keeping Mei, the genius wonder of the support department, in check. However, everything changed after the sports festival. After he showed his intelligence once again to the world and gained the utmost attention of his crazy pink-haired pupil. Now, Izuku visited their lab frequently, be it by his own accord or forcefully dragged by Mei. Higuri now understood the apprehension that shrouded the tired-looking child amidst the fond gushing, lingering on the atmosphere like midnight's quirk but permanent. Oh, he's a nice kid, alright. Listening to other people's problems and giving them tips on how to solve it if they asked him to. But the moment someone pissed him off or mocking those people he cared dearly, he'll tear them. A perk of having an analysis skill, you see. That he easily pointed out their weaknesses and threatened to disable their quirk with simple support items. And speaking about support items, whether it was actually his main reason or he was just taking advantage of the apparent free rein, Mei was cheerfully enabling him. Higuri didn't want to know why Izuku needed paralyzing drugs, stun grenade, sleeping gas grenade, tear gas grenade, any grenade that could easily knock out an adult elephant, really. Honestly, he didn't want to know. Now, here's the problem of Nezu's newest idea. They have to face Class 1A. They have to face him. A child who literally equipped with tons and tons of weapon he was not afraid to use. Shota was trying to dissuade that idea, saying that Izuku is not the UA student and he didn't have to join in on this exercise. The Greenettes even said so himself before he attended the school. Then the principal, cruel little rodent that he was, said they have to or else there'll be imbalance. 20 students within one class means 2 students per one teacher. Izuku agreed, albeit with a ton of complaints. Everyone immediately huddled together. Present Mike suggested to use rock paper scissors to determine who was unfortunate enough to have to face him. A black sheep they needed to sacrifice to contain the devil called Midoriya Izuku. Mama Higuri patted All Might's back as he said, "Rest in peace, my friend." The other teachers solemnly nodded. Toshinori whimpered. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: typo is my most loyal fan, spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. Kota peeked from behind the tree, watching a sleeping Midoriya Izuku in confusion and irritation. Today was the day he dreaded the most in his whole life. The day where wannabe heroes visited his humble abode and be a bunch of idiots. He could almost picture them bragging about their quirk, how cool their performance was. This kind of people, pretentious, selfish jerk, will cheer their association to protect others and celebrated when the said protectors are dead. He dreaded it because he didn't understand how someone could be so callous, so uncaring towards other people's life. As long as they're safe, as long as they could face the next day, they didn't care who they have to sacrifice. Kota really hated the pity, the empty platitude and reassurance that everything is going to be okay. It's not. Everything is not okay, and he felt like he was drowning as each day passed by. This greenette boy was one of them. Kota stared with furrowed eyebrows when Izuku was the only one stepping out of the bus, excluding a hobo-looking man, yawning and snuggling the biggest deer doll he ever saw in his life. Izuku looked like a little kid, bringing that toy along, ignoring the fact that Kota himself was younger than the said teen child, and he kind of scoffed at his existence. Clearly, a spoiled brat. His aunts had said that they'll test Class 1A for their prowess, fighting the Earth Golem without adult supervision so they could garner their power level and prepare them for the future. However, this student, not only he wasn't supposed to be here, Kota accidentally heard. Courtesy from Shota, Eraserhead, who scolded him for sneakily attended this summer training camp instead of being protected within UA's wall. Izuku himself was ignoring the fuming teacher, but he didn't even participate in the event the wild pussycats had prepared. See? Spoiled brat. And now, the same teenager was laying around without a care in Kota's secret location, plushie still clutched almost protectively within his range. What should he do? Kota didn't want to go back to the dining room, too much noise. Not to mention, those students really get on his nerve with all of the hero and training talk. He wanted to rest from the commotion in his hideout for a bit. But now that a stranger had invaded his place. Although his decision was made for him when Midoriya Izuku, he remembered his aunt introduced each of the students to everyone involved, let out a small huff and spoke, "You can sit with me. I'm not gonna bite." Well then. Kota apprehensively approached, sitting at the right side of the greenettes in a tense posture. Izuku still had his eyes closed, so how did he know Kota was there? And how did he find this secret location in the first place? He was sure the only one who knew about it was Ragdoll, and that because of her quirk too, not because he told her where. So, Kota asked. The latter question, not the former, as the kid deemed it not necessary. He also said that this place was his. If someone had an intention to bite to protect the territory, then it was Kota, not Izuku. The said teenager snorted lightly, then apologized for the intrusion. He was searching for a perfect place to relax. To watch the sky full of stars without any interruption from artificial light or the roaring bonfire Class 1A and be created right about now, judging from the orange light shining from behind the surrounding trees. If he stays with them, they'll definitely force him to join. Whereas Izuku just wanted to rest and sleep. Not singing and dancing. He didn't mean to stalk the child, let alone usurp Kota's favorite place. They lapsed into silence after that explanation. Kota, looking a bit uncomfortable with the presence of someone stranger, and Izuku, listening to the commotion below with half ear. The wind blew past by and the night critter chattered on the background. Kota didn't know how much time had passed, the night atmosphere had finally lulled him to peace. It was not until Greenis stood up and stretched that he realized it must be quite a time already. Izuku let out a long yawn, stepping away as he distractedly must. You're not the only one who hated Hiro, you see. That made Kota jolted, gaze immediately sought the form of the skulking student. He didn't corroborate, just kept on walking and leaving the youngest kid alone with a swirling thought. Did Izuku just imply he hated Hiro too? Then what was he doing here, attending the hero class and playing around with the wannabe in this training camp, although he didn't join in on the exercise so far? Kota still hadn't reached his conclusion that day. Not until tomorrow night, when he was, again, brooding over the unfair life in his secret hideout, not noticing a villain appeared from beneath the mountain had he not called for the kid's attention. When every hope was diminished and he was sure this killer will destroy him and turned him into a paste just like what he did to his parents and turned him into a bitter, lonely orphan. Then Izuku, blank, dead orbs, full of grim determination, suddenly appeared out of nowhere, jumping right onto the guy's shoulder and stuck both of the kunais right into his eyes. It was gore, it was horrifying. The villain wasn't in the middle of transforming either, so basically, Izuku just assaulted a normal human instead of a monster. As he was secured safely in between the teenager's hold, vaguely listening on the scream of terror from muscular, Izumi Kota realized. They cannot do that, aren't they? For those who uphold law and justice, Hiro won't needlessly hurt people even if they were villains. Never went for a move that incapacitated them permanently even if it'll save those they needed to protect. Midoriya Izuku is not a brat. Nor he's a hero. He's a guardian angel that picked up the slack those pretentious wannabes left behind. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: typo is my most loyal fan, spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. Dabi thought the little boss was out of his rocker, ordering them to capture one Bakugo Katsuki and bring him to the headquarters, possibly sweet-talked him to become one of their members. Didn't Tamura watch the sports festival? And heard his fiery speech? That kid's a hero through and through, there's no way he'll turn to villainy even if they torture him to death. Pretty sure the kid will even suicide bomb if that means he could eradicate this league of villain once and for all. But anyway, he wasn't the one who pulled the string here. So, even if he thought this idea is stupid as hell, he could only shrug his shoulders and went for the ride. The black-haired teen was in the middle of annoying the said Katsuki, along with his posse, when his sense blared with urgency. Dabi hastily jumped away, barely avoiding a brutal stab to the chest with apprehension. That surprise assault came from a teenager with green hair and green eyes, who was crouching in front of the shocked kids, one hand gripping onto a sword while the other was fingering 3 kunais. His failed attack didn't deter him a bit. In fact, he immediately went for the next and threw the small weapon consecutively toward him. Where did he hide those? The kid's movement was too fast for his eyes to follow. One moment the hand snapped to the inside of his hoodie and the next, shurikens were already flying. Dabi jumped up and down, then boosted himself using his fire quirk when the explosive boy let out an explosive punch. Pun. Ijiro and Shoto followed suit. The earth cracked in a single punch and the mountain of ice toppled the nearby tree, letting out a loud thump and covering the environment with dirt and smoke. These 4 children worked with each other relatively well. The red-haired boy and the heterochromatic teen may stumble here and there. But Katsuki and Izuku, he finally remembered his name. He was one of the commentators in the sports festival, not joining in on the competition because he was the student who got hurt at USJ Fiasco, were like the cogs in the clock. If Katsuki didn't point himself to protect the Greenet's back, then he was attacking Dabi with full force. If Izuku didn't cow the enemy with his aura alone so he couldn't approach the reckless blondie, then he'll be the one who sprang a dirty trap and underhanded attacks. It almost like watching a couple danced. A very dangerous dance. They protect each other. Never intended to upstage anyone's attack, letting them have a go as long as they could subdue the enemy. The performance made Dabi sardonically thought, this must be what a true hero looked like. Helping and cooperating. Definitely different from a certain someone he knew. Oh well, no matter. He brought enough time already and the intended targets are both here. There was a shift in the air and Izuku jolted. He turned to his friends with wide, frantic eyes and immediately sliced the marbles, who appeared out of nowhere, with precision. Unfortunately, that heroic move doomed him as Compress Hand shot out from the ground, through Kurojire's portal, specifically, grazing over Izuku's ankle. Catching the kid off guard? Or he was the type who think about other people's safety first before himself. That was the reason why Izuku couldn't identify the followed-up assault. Really, what a hero. Cue's sarcastic tone, entrapping him inside the available marble within a snap. Katsuki let out a despair shout before he too was caught in compress quirk. Another portal appeared on their back as Dabi smirked. Mission complete. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: typo is my most loyal fan. Spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back-alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. Well, Kurojire tilted his head as he watched the others situated around the room, pondering. They may lose one of their objectives. Ijiro dashed at the very last second before the portal closed, succeeding in prying off Katsuki's cocoon from the villain's hand, and Tamura may sulk a little bit, but at least they didn't come home empty-handed. Besides, their main target was actually Midoriya Izuku, not Bakugo Katsuki. The man-child just cheekily put it there as more player means more chance to win. Since the end of the USJ raid, Sensei had been keeping a close eye on the child named Izuku. It was clear he was different from all of the students combined. He had this look of a killer. It was shown at his brutal attack back there. At how he chopped Tamura's hand without hesitation. Fortunately, it was a clean cut. So, Doctor could connect it back with little difficulty. The white-haired man was ranting for days onward. Said that he swore he will kill him for cheating, although it was a moot point now that all for one wanted him alive. Maybe that was the reason why he added Katsuki as one of their targets too? He wanted to focus his attention on someone else to deter himself not to kill the Greenet and disappointed their sensei. How he stood on even ground, incapacitating a whole bunch of villains they hired beforehand. Alas, they were more of cannon fodder. Not that good of a pawn. And he also managed to outmaneuver Nomu several times before All Might finally come. Then there was the sports festival, where he showed his intelligence for the world to see. It sounded like he was just another child prodigy for the Hero Association to mold. But the thing was, Izuku doesn't have a quirk. He was completely, utterly a normal human. No wonder Sensei was curious. Possibly wanted him to join their cause as well. Quirkless people are easy to sway. Just a promise of a quirk and a better life, and they'll be in Sensei's beck and call. He had done that before, though 99% of them didn't survive. And when they do, they were too brain-dead to be nothing but another test subject for the doctor to tinker with. Kurojire hoped Izuku was the 1% they needed when Sensei bestowed him a power. Those skill sets of his will help them a ton. After a hesitant grumbling from Tenko, Compress tossed the ball to the ground and let Izuku out. However, instead of being unconscious like the performer's previous victims usually were, the kid instantly snapped his eyes open, catching them off guard. His hand moved and swiped. The next second, everyone crumpled to the ground, groaning. Kurogiri was startled when something passed through his body, yet it was pushed to the back of his mind when he saw Izuku went for the exit door. The bartender immediately used his quirk to trap the child in 2 places at once. His lower half was right in front of the entrance while his upper part was right next to the bartender, compressing the portal until it was near constricting. Cease this futile struggle, or I won't hesitate to chop your body in 2 if you moved even an inch. Greeny went still. His only answer to that treat was a low snarl, along with baring his teeth aggressively like a cornered animal. Kurogiri stepped to the back of the bar, looking for the thing that had whizzed past him not a minute ago. He saw it glinting and realized it was a Sinbon. When he turned around and looked at the pile of writhing bodies on the floor, he saw the same needle stuck on their neck. They weren't dead, so a paralyzing drug? Lucky for him, his body was mostly a mist. Blunt weapons didn't work on the man. As long as nobody aimed for the neck bracket, he was pretty much invisible. The television decided to turn on by itself and the shadow of their true boss, All for One, appeared with a crackle. A hum echoed. Considering gaze was thrown before the leader finally spoke, I heard a commotion. Is something wrong, Kurogiri? Something's wrong indeed, he demurely thought as he pondered how to handle this situation. Everyone was down on the ground and the only one moving couldn't do much in a term of subduing the kid. Not only he was occupied in trapping Izuku down, but they also didn't think of a backup plan if their mission turned awry. Now, he could only sit in exasperation while he waited for the paralyzing drug to wear off. So Compress could use his quirk for the second time, asked Spinner to prepare the containment chamber while the Mistman steals some chloroform from the nearest chemical supply company. Not because he's a villain but because you can't really buy a chloroform from a mini-market. Oh, he should also check the kid for any hidden weapons. Didn't want Izuku to put his companions back to this exact situation once more. Kurogiri sighed and hoped this extra job he did will be totally worth it at the end of the day. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: Typo is my most loyal fan, spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. A/Enemy, happily reading some BNHA fanfics. My brain, Toga loves blood, right? Do you think she loves looking at her own blood? Do you think she's suicidal? What if Izuku tortures her until she's basically swimming in her own blood? Will she love it or will she hate it? And realize that her victims don't like it when she tortured them? That she finally realized that being at the end of her knife is a scary thing to ever happen to them? Me, staring at my brain judgingly. My brain, what? Don't lie to me. Just admit it that the idea is interesting and you want to create fanfic based on this. Me, you're right. As you can see from my conversation with my sometimes sadistic brain, this chapter will be a bit gore. I'm not the type who wrote thriller story, however, so I don't think it will turn out as scary as I make it sound to be. I don't mind if you completely skip this chapter, by the way. Just saying. In summary, Toga wanted to use her version of persuasions to Izuku, but he turned that around instead. Himiko was happy to have a new friend in this dreary place. Oh, don't get her wrong. Everyone here is so fun. Tamura let her play the game with him sometimes, albeit begrudgingly. Apparently, she was the only one here who knew what even a console is. Twice never failed to amuse her with his double personality shows. Dabi was fun to tease, especially if he started sparking blue and threatened to burn her up with that. Compress was a street performer, enough said. Kurogiri gave her the best juice there is. Spinner was happy to give her a tour to his swords collection, and gave her some if he was being extremely generous. And Magna is her companion in girls' night, as she knew the latest trend of everything sparkly. But still, sometimes she wished she had a friend of her own age. And surprise, surprise, Midoriya Izuku fitted the bill. Himiko skipped cheerfully to the basement and grinned widely when she saw Greenie with his hair down, strapped by a handcuff. The short chain was buried into the brick wall while the handcuff itself cradled both of Izuku's hands close. He had his head down, not wearing anything aside from his black tank top and a boxer. Kurogiri decided to strip Izuku down so no hidden weapon was squirreled away anymore. Everybody was surprised at how many kunai, shuriken, and sunbon he brought. Honestly, where did he hide that? And bandages all over his body. Dabi and Tamura decided to maim him a little bit for the stunt he pulled the moment he woke up. The blonde girl let out an excited squeal, looking at him, because Izuku looked so adorable with all the injuries marring his skin. And today, Himiko giggled once more as she unlatched one of her beloved knives from the waist pouch. It will be her turn to decorate him with the pretty red. She approached, compliments about how pretty he looked with all the red was spilling out of her tiny mouth already. Asking rhetorically if he wanted to join in on their cause and be her friend now that he was bathed in her favorite color. Izuku didn't answer. He didn't scream when Toga put a bit of force in the incision she made on his cheek. Just kept on glaring with those blank, dead eyes with furrowed eyebrows. And wasn't that a questionable reaction too? He did groan in agony here and there when Dabi burned his tight or when Tamura turned half an inch of his neck to dust. Or as Himiko slashed his skin open. But that's it. He didn't scream. Didn't ask for the torturer to stop. Aside from the silent grunts, it almost like this teen was immune to pain. Such a pity. She really wanted to hear his cute voice. Maybe it was his quirk? But the blue fire user said Izuku's power is heightening his scary aura. Enough that it could actually force people down to the ground without lifting a single finger. You know, now that she thought about it, they could be a marvelous duo then. Izuku, using his quirk to incapacitate the target while Himiko does her job in cutting them to pieces. That was a good idea. Now, she really wanted him to be her friend. While Blondie was too busy daydreaming, Izuku's head lolled to the side, unconsciously piercing his cheek to the knife a little further. Oops, better pulled that away from his vicinity. Didn't want to maim him too much, she still wanted to decorate him a little more after all. Izuku didn't take notice of that. He just went on saying, voice a bit hoarse, he's just a puppet. Who's your real boss? What do you want from me? Himiko blinked innocently. A puppet? Did he mean Tamura? It seems so. The hand guy may actually be their leader, but judging from the blurry scene on the television, he may actually not their true boss. She could at least discern that much, thank you. And anyway, Himiko won't answer that. She said, with too much energy in her refusal. What a cute question though, especially the latter one. Didn't she, along with Dabi and Tamura, even if their conversation was mixed with an irritated grumble and angry howl, already said they want to recruit him? She didn't know what the true purpose of Izuku's presence in this little group of theirs, but at least Himiko wanted him to be her friend. Izuku snorted mockingly at that, lip thinned in a derisive smile. Blondie didn't like that expression and she stabbed his shoulder, twisting it slightly. That immediately wiped his smug look from the battered face, orbs blank once more as he focused his attention on the pain on his body. But it didn't take long before his usually unchanging face suddenly lit up, almost like a child getting an early Christmas gift. The lips quirked up as his voice echoed in the dingy basement. So sudden, it actually caught her off guard. Your persuasion is kinda lacking, you know. Do you want me to teach you how? Before Himiko could question his offer, Izuku opened his mouth. On the tip of his tongue was a sunbon, glinting under the glimmering light of the basement's lamp. He spat it out in a split second, and it nailed her right on her forehead. As her body went limp for the second time, another paralyzing drug. He kicked her hard. Her body flew and crashed unceremoniously to the front of the room. She hacked and coughed. And the moment she opened her eyes, Greenie was already in front of her, wrists bleeding. He just broke the handcuff from the wall with raw strength alone. And crazed look marred his green orbs. Himiko's knife, that she used to draw a line on his unblemished face before, was now in his possession. He also pulled another one out of her pouch. Now each of his hand was gripping the weapon in reverse grip. The air around the place suddenly tightened. Did he use his quirk? But that handcuff, the anti-quirk handcuff, was still on him. And Himiko. Himiko suddenly had a very bad feeling. The deranged smile widened even more. Izuku whispered mockingly, "The first step of the art of torture is relieving them from one of their 5 senses." The knife went down, and it sunk deep into her eyes. Himiko screamed, "Ah! You should not let your voice be known to the enemy. They'll treat it as an invitation to do you more." Izuku chided gleefully, clamping her mouth close after he stabbed her trembling hands with the same knife, eliciting another pain scream, to the wooden floor so it'll keep her from lashing out. Himiko could not see, but she felt how he sat on her waist, preventing her thrashing legs from kicking him out of the way. Not that she could anyway. Not with the paralyzing drug running on her veins. Izuku pulled another knife from her repertoire. The smirk was evident from his tone and chill went down her entire back. "If the victim doesn't want to talk, this is what you should do next." She didn't know how much time had passed. It could be just a couple of minutes, it could be hours. Heck, it could be days. She didn't know. Her eyesight was long gone and the pain was too agonizing for her to count the time. The thing that she could feel was how the tip of her weapon grazed her skin. How Izuku pulled every single nail on her fingers out, chopping both of her thumbs so she could not grab anything as easily as before. How he stabbed her shoulder if she moved too much and carving her face with meticulous doodles slowly yet painfully, a payback of what she did to him not a moment ago. All the while enduring the pain Himiko had inflicted upon him, being that she tried to fight back by chomping onto his palm with her sharp fangs yet to no avail. In fact, it only made Izuku chuckled and clutched her face with even more strength. It scratched her lower jaw and drew another drop of blood out. The drug had slowly diminished, along with her struggle. Her scream petered off pitifully and tears started cascading from the bloody muss of the eyeball. Himiko lost all of her energy to move. Not to mention, losing all the blood in a fast rate that her body shuddered involuntarily. Izuku cut her stomach open like an experiment frog on an examination table, prodding the organs inside while cooing at how obedient she was, listening on the lecture this senior had graciously bestowed upon his junior. At one point, after he said he cut one of her kidneys from its supposed place. "Human doesn't need both to live, right?" he drawled. "You don't mind if I take one and give it to the poor, right?" A loud explosion rang throughout the building and Izuku stopped. He let out a silent gasp, like he just realized he had done something bad. A gasp she knew so well because she heard it multiple times from her neighbors when she mercilessly cut someone up to suck their blood, and Izuku immediately straightened up. His voice was heard amidst the sudden chaos, cracked and tired. "I know I should have met with that therapist myself. Troublesome bee." As the commotion was happening on the upper floor and the greenette walked away from the mutilated girl, she sobbed. The crazed and bloodlust she had craved for a very long time disappeared as the abyss pulled her mind to the deepest darkness available. "I just want a friend. A friend who understands me. A friend who will be there in my happiest and saddest time. Is it forbidden for me to have such a simple wish? To loved and be loved?" That was her thought before unconsciousness took her. And Toga Himiko breathed her last. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: typo is my most loyal fan. Spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. And sorry for the last chap, guys. But I did say Izuku will kill someone in the near future, right? This is only his first victim. 3. For the first time in his too long life, All for One was curious. The object of his curiosity was now standing in front of him, clutching onto a tanto he snatched from the League of Villains warehouse, after he knocked Spinner down with a kick between the legs for confiscating his weapon, and glaring heatedly. His appearance of wearing nothing but a black tank top and a boxer didn't make him ridiculous. Instead, he looked even more deadly. Midoriya Izuku, his name was. What an intriguing human he is. All for One had been observing the said kid since the botched USJ infiltration. His interest was piqued considerably when Tamura was back from his first mission, angry and handless. It was an unsightly scene to stare. Not to mention, a barbaric thing to do for a kid who attended a heroic class. All for One vowed to keep an eye on him from that moment on. And what a journey of a lifetime this observation was. He knew now Izuku liked to prowl around the city at night, breaking the UA's supposedly impenetrable defense just for the sake of his daily walk. Most of the time, Greenie was just doing his own business before he encountered a crime. Although there existed the days where he practically searched for one. His face was darker and his eyes were blanker than, jittery energy rolling out of his entire body. It was clear he wanted to retaliate and smack the bad guy upside down, a way for him to release his pent-up emotion. Yet he held back, albeit barely. Instead, he just cranked his quirk up, the villains dropped unconscious. That was one thing All for One questioned too, by the way. His quirk. Or lack thereof. How in the world did he do that? Where he turned the atmosphere around into a chilling temperature with glare alone. And, as he said before, could even cut people's respiratory, causing them to faint. Did he actually have power but hide it for some reason? His scan quirk didn't detect anything, so the Greenets was completely empty. No wonder Kai wanted to bring the kid into the Shai Haki headquarters. He's a fine experiment to be looked at. Anyway, Izuku is a killer through and through. All for One must as he evaded All Might devastating punch, followed by Izuku's own attack. This child was resourceful, menacing. No matter how the other heroes ordered him to stand down, he just kept on pushing. Picking up the useless junk scattering around the floor from their intense battle, broken pole, broken brick, broken glass, broken vehicles, and turning it into impromptu weapons. Now looking straight at Izuku and not via television or hacked CCTV, he is completely convinced that this teenager is a seasoned warrior. No wasted movement, immediately went for the vital area for the optimal damage. He didn't hesitate to hurt, and that may be the reason why these heroes were so hellbent in stopping Izuku, even if they have to face the malicious All for One one-on-one, despite their fear. They didn't want the teen to do something he couldn't take back, such as robbing other people's life. He still has much to live for. The villain thought it was a futile attempt, however. Izuku had been falling down this rabbit hole for a long time. It started with Stain, where he could subdue him easily. Laughably so. Then there was Muscular's case, who was now forever blind. And Himiko. All for One nodded in contemplation while countering All Might's fist effortlessly. Himiko, Izuku's greatest accomplishment. There was a hidden camera in that basement where they locked him up. And the true leader of the League of Villain oversaw everything. Not only he managed to turn the situation into his favor, he did that without anyone noticing. That takes skill. He worked fast, effective, so very used to it, like he had already tortured someone before. All for One was morbidly curious at that. He wanted to know what was going on inside this kid's mind. Wanted to know what makes him tick. So he didn't inform Kurogiri to check, letting Izuku massacre the girl till the death come knocking the door. Although he never accounted for him to burn the place down after All Might broke their safe house. Who knew combining a hairspray, belongs to Magna, and a lighter, belongs to Twice, could be so hazardous. It was common knowledge now that he thought about it. Everyone knew you should not spray a flammable substance near a fire. But then again, the existence of a quirk become everyone's first attention, that such measly science was of no concern to anyone notice. All for one was mortified to admit that he thought the same. What an ingenious strategy otherwise. Himiko's body was now burned beyond reason, buried under the rubles and pierced by the broken roof tiles. Izuku had covered up his vicious murder within a snap and nobody known the wiser. Pity. Here he hoped the doctor could examine the greenette's work and check if he could steal a quirk from a corpse. Her power was too valuable to be discarded of after all. All for one backhanded best genist right on the face, then ducked away from the flying glass. Izuku just threw them all of like it was some kind of a dagger. Or kunai, really. While the battle raged on, the kid's aura kept on blaring, keep on hanging. It was suffocating even to the heroes around, no matter how the child tried to contain the power output. Speaking of the kid, it had been bugging the villain's mind as of now. Izuku was very aggressive since the end of Himiko's lesson. What's wrong with him? Aside from being kidnapped and got tortured by his subordinate, of course. It almost like he was dissociating. Like he was trying to push down his emotion to the deep dark abyss and focused onto the task at hand instead. He saw those gaze before. It was the gaze of a victim. The one he saw from the previous one for All's predecessor's family, where they tried to take revenge on All for one for murdering their precious people. Emphasis on tried. Curious. Young Izuku is really a fascinating subject. So, All for one tried to take a gander, using one of the quirks from his repertoire of many. Didn't remember where he got this, but this quirk, Mind Reader *, is a valuable quirk nonetheless. He should have known that curiosity killed the cat. Unfortunately, this time around, satisfaction didn't bring the feline back. When he delved into Izuku's memories, he saw an image of carnage. Fire sprouted from the horizon and earth crumbled like sand. Weapons were thrown. Katana beheaded an unsuspecting enemy. The sound of lightning crackled. A man with white hair just pierced someone else's heart. There was a weeping father in the middle of the battlefield. The platinum blonde man was ignoring the fighting around, too busy hugging onto the still body of his daughter. Wind whisked past by. So fast it cut the white creature's limbs to pieces. A teen with bright, blue eyes dropped in front of him, showing the follower his confident back. Then the same teen was dying. Izuku's? All for one's trembling hand was holding his head upright. The usually playful smile turned sour. His lips open and unspoken words were uttered. A humongous orange monster roared in anguish. All for one let out a gasp. And Midoriya Izuku screamed. "How dare you!" He dashed Tonto straightened to the fore. His blank, dead eyes were now bloodshot. The intimidating aura flared like crazy that the old villain was actually having a hard time breathing now. The heroes themselves were powerless. The sudden onslaught of a negative air forced them down to the ground. All for one dodged the careless strike, then blocked the spinning kick using his upper arm. Izuku's unmoving mask had finally cracked, showing them the true emotion hidden within. You shouldn't have that power. It isn't yours. How dare you, how dare you, how dare you, you thief. For the first time in his too long life, All for one was curious. He recalled the vision of a monster rampaging through the land of humanity. And for the first time in his too long life, All for one was terrified. The night of the final battle continued on. Disclaimer: Boku no Hero Academia belongs to Horikoshi Kohei. Genres: adventure, hurt, comfort. Warnings: typo is my most loyal fan. Spelling mistakes because English is not my mother language, possibly OOC. No beta, so beware of grammar mistakes. Summary: Shota thought discovering their Nightwalker to be a kid was bad enough. Not to mention how the said kid is literally quirkless, meaning the law cannot touch him. I don't want to be a hero. It's too troublesome. And then this? Maybe it's not too late to ask Nezu for a raise this year. Or, being a good citizen and stopping an illegal back alley transaction resulted in him getting some high-ranking villain's attention. He didn't even raise a hand at those a-holes. Just glaring at them hard enough, they turned tail. This second chance of life is so not worth it. What a drag. A/N after waiting for so long, it's finally here, guys. Izuku's POV. Izuku knew he was projecting. He knew it, but he couldn't help it. He saw an image of a cheery boy wearing a fur hoodie in Bakugo Katsuki. Boisterous, too sure in his own skill, someone needed to smack him down a peg so he won't kill himself because of his overconfidence. Not to mention, both of them love dogs too. He saw an image of his own mother in Midoriya Inko. Of course, the plump woman is also his mother in this universe, but no, he wasn't talking about that. He was talking about her personality. Or rather, the hidden personality within her. Inko may be nice and shy, a heartwarming person and a wonderful mother. But when others tried to hurt her precious people, she lashed out. Her mouth started spewing hurtful words, and she won't hesitate to bring the argument to the side of the law if need be, a perk of being a social lawyer. Izuku's skill in threatening people didn't just come from his previous life, see. It also thanks to her and her protective streak. He saw an image of his own father too in Midoriya Hisashi, even if he never met the man directly except for the face cam. The man was too cheerful to be the reincarnation of a war general. However, that intellect, that skill in negotiating. How there was this glint in his eyes whenever everything he wanted was going according to plan. Izuku loves playing online shogi or chess with him in their free time. It almost like the good old day. He saw an image of his teacher in Tsukachi Naomasa. Their sense of justice, worry for other people's safety to the point they lose their sleep over it. After the first few of Izuku's night walk, the nightmare was too much. He needed to get away. He needed to escape the suffocating darkness. Naomasa was readily happy to check on him, bringing some dessert to snack on or indulging Izuku in his need of chewing the gum. He couldn't smoke in his current form. His mother is going to have an aneurysm. The police officer was his second father, just like how his old teacher used to be. He saw an image of their vice leader in Aizawa Shota. It was such a jarring thing to see when Izuku first met him. After he knew he didn't have his usual trick in this universe and could only depend on the killing intent technique to survive, because killing intent is not a unique thing, apparently. It almost like determination. Everyone has it. You just have to cultivate it. His nightly walk turned into a nightly patrol. And that particular day was where his nightmare felt too real for his taste, that he immediately went to see the first trouble he encountered. To vent his emotion out. Shota then appeared from the sky, subduing the two robbers efficiently, effectively. And Izuku. Izuku was having a brief flashback of the same person wearing the same dark clothing along with a half-face mask, hiding their true power beneath a well-crafted persona, Shota, with his tired, always primed to fall asleep mask, and his previous vice leader, with his cheerful and perverted mask, yet ready to unleash the dirty trick they prepared as long as the civilians are safe. The Greenette was stunned. He almost thought that he was back to his old world. It reminded him when the man taught Izuku of how to be a good agent. That move, that intensity, that sneakiness. His second teacher may not be the leader of the hidden organization anymore, but the skill will never, ever be dull. Then he blinked. And that vision was gone, leaving another heartache that will always fester like a bleeding wound. After that slight ride to the past, Izuku's journey to find the similarity continued. He saw an image of an old leader with a tobacco addiction in Nezu. Both of them were crafty, wise, a good dean with a tragic backstory. Though he could see, of course, even without the need to hack the official file in the government record. He knew Nezu is the victim of torture. That flash of dread he saw in those beady, black orbs was a clear indication. Izuku saw those kinds of flashes within his own eyes, after all. He saw an image of a meek girl with purple hair in Uraraka Ochako. A sweet little thing. Except in this universe, she was more confident, more sure of herself. She wasn't the girl who had to face the backlash of her family alone. She was the girl who was ready to face the world so she could protect her precious people. Look at how big of a difference it was when a kid was put in a supportive family. They may be a bit poor, but wealth wasn't a guarantee for a happy life in the first place. He saw an image of a stiff teenager wearing sunglasses in Ida Tenya. Strict and following the rules to a T. The bespectacled boy was just like Katsuki, where someone needed to slap a common sense into him so he won't do something, or rather, do nothing that will land him in a situation he couldn't fix. Rules are there to keep you in order, sure. But sometimes, rules were suffocating. His best friend will die in a gruesome way if he didn't come to save him. No matter how that action caused the enemy to easily capture Izuku in the process. Where the hurt, the pain, the despair happened, make it stop, make it stop, make it stop. He saw an image of the said best friend/teammate in Kirishima Ijiro. Friendly, nice, ready to help people in need. Their power may differ, but the application of it was the same. Where both of them stood tall like a wall on the front line, ready to be a shield for his friends to duck behind. He saw an image of his other teammate in Azuitsu. A big sister everyone needed to ground them down, and when she's gone, everything crumbled. Izuku was kind of glad the frog girl didn't have the same bossy tone though, even if the too direct approach and no sugarcoating was still there. No matter how he missed her, he didn't want to face that attitude once more. And then there was Kaminari Denki. The first time he saw the electric boy, his body immediately straightened, steps instantly halted. Izuku saw an image of him. Very clearly. Of the boy with the same hair color and blue eyes. Of the boy he vowed to follow. Of the boy he failed to protect. Denki came, bumbling through the class like a penguin on a roller skate with a smile so fake, the greenette grimaced. A happy-go-lucky teen who silently screamed for help because, stupid selfless brat, they didn't want to cause a problem to anyone so he didn't let others hear his desperate plea. Not to mention, Todoroki Shoto. He literally saw an image of a red-haired insomniac in him. Full of hatred and sadness. Wanting others to see him as he was and not someone else's shadow. Both of them. Both of them. Even in this universe, both of them were still just as moronic as before. At least Denki had tried to ask for help, even if the therapist he attended before was useless. Seriously. You didn't just say to a 4-year-old child that he's doomed to be a brainless idiot. Not exactly what that therapist said, but the sentiment was the same anyway. Just because his quirk fried his brain, doesn't mean he's a lost cause. This is why he hated this universe. The moment everyone believed that quirk is useless, then it's useless. Stupid prejudice and stupid shallow mind. Yet Shoto? He just let the problem fester. Izuku knew the heterochromatic child couldn't help it. Abused victim tended not to believe in others. God, how it took him too long to cajole his leader to speak about his own problem rather than skirting around it. However, it still irked him otherwise. Because it reminded him how he screwed it all off before. He knew the sign was there. He was just being a pig-headed lazy bum who tried to ignore things that didn't suit his ideal world. What was his past him thinking? That was why he'll help them. As he felt like his late leader and the leader's brother-in-arms will kill him for good if he didn't get a grip in this second chance of life. It was so hard though. So hard when you're not here with me. Everyone, I missed you so moo. Izuku is protective. Twice as protective, if he said so himself. He failed the first time around, he didn't want to fail this time either. Didn't want to feel their blood on his hand any longer. So when USJ came, he snapped. His hidden agent persona came full force. He's wearing the outfit too. The same outfit his leader picked for him. What an ironic twist of fate, for his new mother to accidentally found his doodles, that he made in an attempt to chase the nightmare away, and turn that same sketch into a full-functioning bodysuit. Really, fate sure is a bit. Izuku buried his panic and worry to the deepest part of his psyche and let the task at hand be his first priority. Defend, attack, protect, kill. Hitoshi and Tsuyu may be traumatized, but they were alive. And he was okay with that. It didn't just stop there. League of Villain won't forgive and forget and instead, hiring another mercenary to do the deed. When he first saw the short video Shoto sent to him, of Stain standing over the bleeding Tenya, he felt his heart just rose to his throat. Clearly, his first impression was right. In this world, it's killed or be killed. He didn't hold back when the botched camp training happened then. Gouging the villain's eyes without mercy and torturing the girl till the dead come knocking. He did chide himself for getting trapped in his nightmare. The persuasion trick she did remind him too much with his past experience, that he did such a messy job with her. His method was usually tidier than this, courtesy of his previous torturer. What a lucky thing that the basement and the warehouse were right beside each other, however. Not to mention with a bunch of heroes, pretentious jerk, who was trying to save him, had given him ample time to rummage through the wares and produced a simple yet effective way to discard the evidence. So, that thing was taken care of. Then the final battle came, and all for one peek into his mind. His repressed emotions just burst like a balloon right there and then. How dare he, how dare he, how dare he? That power wasn't his. It was hers. It belongs to her. It belongs to his big sister, to his teammate, to his friend. I won't let him tarnish her legacy. I won't let him tarnish her family legacy. Why are you siding with the heroes, Midoriya Izuku? All for one asked, after he woke up from whatever trance he got the moment he was out from Izuku's mind. They were still locked in this dangerous dancing of theirs. Punching, kicking, slashing. It was obvious the villain wasn't taking him seriously. He didn't use the devastating aspect of his quirk to him so far. No matter how trained Izuku was in the art of killing, he could do nothing if the intended target knew every step he will make. Assassin relies on surprise attacks, after all. But goddamn, he'll try it anyway. All for one was just humoring the kid. Must be thinking to show the media how useless heroes are. Letting a child thrice under their age to fight their fight. The older man grabbed the broken pole from Izuku's grip and yanked it away. The kid himself immediately went to grab for the piece of glass he hid on the back of his boxer and use it as an impromptu kunai. It failed, deflected to the side, and both of them were now facing each other in a comfortable distance. You know the hero didn't save your friend, Ichi? Instead, it was the other way around, wasn't it? Shut up, the greenettes growled low and let his killing intent intensified, chalking anyone around who was unfortunate enough to be within his vicinity. Don't you dare speak about my leader that way. But I was right, wasn't I? That your friend have to be the hero himself, I know. Izuku finished, teeth glinted, yes. I hated heroes. I hate it with all my might. How couldn't I? When my leader needed them. When he was suffering from a power he never wished to have. For a fate he never wished to burden? He was belittled, punched and kicked. While these heroes, he spat the name with enough venom, everyone could almost feel it on their own tongue, only needed to have 3 years of education, an exam without real danger and whoop-de-fucking do, you're a hero. Disgusting. Fucking bullshit. The crowd fell into a hush, widened eyes were seen around the fallen comrades. Yet Izuku didn't care. He didn't care as he glared hard at the ancient enemy, my leader, my friend. He was a real hero. Even though he knew there's no guarantee those bastards will ever accept his existence, he went and protect them anyway. The fight went to a stall as Greenie cried. He cried and cried, baring his heart for anyone to see. A heart of a tired man. A heart of a tired warrior. I tried to respect his last wish. To protect innocent people in his stead and stop the war from ever happening. I really tried. But I still don't understand. I don't understand how he could be so forgiving. I don't understand how he could smile like that when he was hurt. How could he promise me that everything will be fine as he was dying right in my hand? There was blood seeping through his trembling fingers. Get it off, get it off, get it off, get it off. Why didn't you come? Izuku wailed to the night sky. There's a villain right in front of us. Why didn't you come? But didn't. Friends. Izuku knew he was projecting. These people never do him, nor his late friends, any wrong. Be it the heroes or the villain. They didn't know reincarnation is real. They didn't know Inko's only son is not a child. Never a child. This was just him throwing a temper tantrum. A misplaced anger. A survivor guilt. He knew it, but he couldn't help it. Because Midoriya Izuku promised me that you're going to be nice. The dying face of a brave soldier swam in his hazy sight. The red on his face smeared his brilliantly sunny yellow to a disgusting color. His smile was tiny. So he reached his trembling hand over the agent's face and wiped his tears away, saying, "Promised me that you're going to be happy. Shikama." Because Nara Shikamaru just missed his friends so much.